Wooden beams creak softly overhead as the first light of dawn filters through the small, rippled glass window. Thomas the innkeeper opens his eyes, the familiar scent of last night's hearth fire still lingering in the air. His weathered hands, marked by decades of service, reach instinctively for the worn woolen blanket that has kept him warm through countless winter nights. The world outside is still wrapped in that peculiar hushed anticipation that comes before a village wakes. In this moment of peaceful solitude, before the day's labours begin, Thomas allows himself to linger in the comfort of his straw-filled mattress, savouring the quiet that will soon give way to the bustle of travellers and townsfolk alike. The inn has been his life, his purpose, his constant companion through seasons of plenty and times of hardship. The weight of responsibility settles upon him like an old friend as he prepares to rise and begin another day of service. The floorboards beneath, his bare feet are cool and smooth, polished by years of passage. Thomas moves with practiced ease through the sleeping chamber he keeps at the back of the inn, a modest space befitting a man whose true domain lies beyond its door. His movements follow the same pattern they have for 20 summers, a dance so familiar his body remembers the steps without conscious thought. He splashes water from a ceramic basin onto his face, the shock of cold bringing clarity to his mind. The water was drawn from the well yesterday evening, and now carries the chill of night within it. As it runs down his weathered cheeks and into his greying beard, Thomas feels the last vestiges of sleep wash away. Through the small window, he can see the eastern sky beginning to blush with the promise of morning, pale streaks of amber and rose pushing back the receding darkness. Dressed in simple woolen garments, sturdy trousers, a linen shirt worn soft with age, and a leather jerkin that bears the stains and scars of countless spilled drinks and kitchen mishaps, Thomas makes his way to the heart of his establishment. The common room lies in shadows, chairs upturned on tables, the massive hearth dark and cool. This room holds the stories of thousands who have passed through its doors. Merchants with tales of distant markets, pilgrims seeking blessings at the cathedral 3 days' journey east, soldiers with haunted eyes and boisterous laughs that mask their memories of battle. If the walls could speak, they would tell of countless lives intersecting within this humble space, of alliances formed and secrets shared over cups of ale and bowls of stew. Thomas inhales deeply, the air carrying traces of last night's revelry, spilled wine, lingering pipe smoke, the faint sweetness of beeswax candles. His first task, as it has been every day since he inherited the inn from his father, is to resurrect the hearth fire. He kneels before the stone fireplace, its surface blackened by years of flames. With practiced hands, he shifts the ashes, seeking out the embers that might have survived the night. Finding a promising orange glow, he carefully adds kindling. Thin shavings of dried wood, a handful of straw, and bends close, his breath gentle and encouraging. The embers respond to his attention, tiny flames beginning to dance among the kindling. There is something profoundly satisfying in this daily ritual, this coaxing of life from the previous day's fire. It speaks to something deep in Thomas's soul, a sense of continuity and constancy in a world often marked by unpredictability. As the fire grows stronger, light begins to push back the shadows in the common room. Thomas moves to the shuttered windows, pulling them open one by one, allowing the early morning light to stream into the space. Dust motes dance in the golden beams, swirling as the fresh air disturbs their slow descent. The village beyond is beginning to stir. A rooster crows in the distance, The blacksmith's hammer rings out with its first strikes of the day. A mother calls to her child. These sounds form the familiar backdrop to Thomas's morning routine, a comfortable symphony that has accompanied his days for as long as he can remember. The inn stands at the crossroads of the small village, witnessing the ebb and flow of daily life, a fixed point in the shifting currents of human existence. With the fire established and growing stronger, Thomas turns his attention to the tables and benches. He rights each chair, smoothing his palm over the wood-worn satin smooth by countless patrons. Each piece of furniture has its history. The long trestle table near the hearth was crafted by his grandfather. The bench along the eastern wall came from a merchant who couldn't pay his bill in coin, but offered his skills as a carpenter instead. Thomas knows each nick and dent, each burn mark from a carelessly placed candle, each stain from spilled wine or ale. These imperfections are not flaws to him, but character, telling the story of his inn as clearly as any written chronicle. The sound of footsteps on the stairs signals the arrival of Agnes, the cook who has served the inn for nearly 15 years. Her round face appears perpetually flushed from the kitchen's heat, her strong arms capable of kneading enough dough to feed a room full of hungry travelers. She nods to Thomas, their greeting wordless but warm. The comfortable silence of two people who have worked side by side for so long that conversation becomes unnecessary. Agnes disappears into the kitchen, and soon the clatter of pots and the rhythmic thud of a knife against a cutting board join the morning's growing symphony. The scent of fresh bread will soon follow, one of the inn's most reliable enticements to both travelers and villagers alike. Thomas makes his way to the cellar, a cool underground chamber accessed by a heavy wooden trapdoor behind the serving counter. The steps leading down are worn in the middle, testament to the countless journeys made to retrieve barrels of ale and wine. The air below is cool and damp, carrying the complex aromas of fermentation, the sharp tang of ale, the fruity notes of wine, the earthy scent of the dirt floor. Barrels line the walls, each marked with chalk to indicate its contents and when it was tapped. Thomas moves confidently through the dim space, his eyes having long ago learned to navigate the perpetual twilight of the cellar. He selects a barrel of ale that will be ready to serve today, testing its weight with practiced hands. Returning to the common room with the smaller cask, Thomas sets about preparing the serving area. Tankards of varying sizes, wooden, pewter, and a few prized ceramic ones reserved for special guests, are arranged in neat rows. Each has been washed the previous night and left to dry, now awaiting the day's use. Thomas runs his fingertips along the rim of a wooden tankard, feeling for splinters or rough patches that might catch on a patron's lip. Finding one, he takes a small knife from his belt and carefully smooths the offending spot, his movements precise and practiced. It is in these small attentions that Thomas takes particular pride. The minor details that ensure a guest's comfort often go unnoticed when done properly, yet their absence would immediately be felt. The sound of the kitchen door opening brings with it a wave of heavenly aroma. Fresh bread, just pulled from the oven. Agnes emerges with a tray laden with golden brown loaves, their crusts crackling slightly as they cool. She sets them on the serving counter, and Thomas inhales deeply, savouring the scent that never fails to make his mouth water, even after all these years. Agnes returns to the kitchen without comment, but the slight upward curve of her mouth tells Thomas that she noticed his appreciation. The bread will be served alongside bowls of pottage for the midday meal, a hearty mixture of whatever vegetables are in season, cooked slowly with herbs and occasionally enriched with scraps of meat when available. The inn's door swings open, admitting the first customer of the day. It is Willem the cooper, whose workshop stands just across the village square. His arrival at this hour is as predictable as the sunrise. Willem comes each morning for a cup of small beer before beginning his day's work. His hands and forearms bear the calluses and minor burns of his trade, and his conversation is often punctuated by references to the barrels he crafts, as if all life's experiences can be understood through the metaphor of staves and hoops. Thomas greets him with a nod and reaches for a tankard, filling it from a pitcher of the weak morning beer that many villagers prefer to the sometimes questionable water from the communal well. "Fair morning to you, Thomas," Willem says, settling his sturdy frame onto a bench near the fire. The air has a bite to it today. Autumn's reaching its fingers toward us earlier than usual, I'm thinking. He accepts the tankard with a grateful nod, taking a long swallow before continuing. "Heard from Godfrey the carter that there's a merchant train expected from the north. Might be here by nightfall if the roads haven't turned to mud from yesterday's rain." Thomas absorbs this information with interest. Merchant trains mean business, rooms to let, extra meals to prepare, ale and wine to be consumed in quantity. They also bring news from distant places, stories to enliven the common room during the evening hours, and occasionally exotic goods that might not otherwise make their way to this modest village. He makes a mental note to inform Agnes that they should perhaps prepare more food than usual for the evening meal. The inn has 6 proper rooms for letting, 2 with actual bed frames and straw-filled mattresses. The others simply enclosed spaces with clean straw on the floor and blankets provided at an extra cost. If the merchant train is large, some might need to sleep in the common room or even the stable. As Willem enjoys his morning beer, more villagers begin to arrive. Some come for a quick breakfast of bread and cheese before heading to the fields or workshops. Others simply to exchange the latest news and gossip before the day's labor demands. Their full attention. Thomas moves among them with easy familiarity, filling tankards, slicing bread, answering questions about travelers who passed through recently, relaying messages left for local residents. In many ways, the inn serves as the village's central nervous system, a place where information flows freely, where connections are made and maintained, where the community's pulse can be most clearly felt. A young boy darts through the door, his face alight with excitement. It's Martin, the blacksmith's son, often employed by villagers to carry messages when speed is required. "Master Thomas," he calls, slightly out of breath. "Father says to tell you that the bridge repair is finished, and the merchants shouldn't have any trouble crossing when they arrive. This is welcome news. The small bridge spanning the stream to the north had been damaged during the last heavy rains, and there had been concern that it might delay travelers or force them to seek accommodations elsewhere." Thomas thanks the boy. With a small piece of honeycomb, a treat reserved for special occasions or services rendered. Martin's eyes widen at this unexpected bounty, and he clutches it carefully as he backs toward the door, already anticipating the sweet pleasure awaiting him. Thomas watches him go with a slight smile. The joy of children is one pleasure his. Life has not included. He never married, the inn becoming both his family and his legacy. There were opportunities in his younger days, village girls who might have made suitable wives, but Thomas had always hesitated, unwilling to divide his attention between the inn and a family. Now, in his 53rd year, he sometimes wonders about this choice, particularly on cold winter nights when the inn grows quiet and the silence in his private chamber grows heavy with possibilities never realized. The morning continues its predictable rhythm, the common room filling and emptying as villagers come and go. Thomas notes with satisfaction that the level in the ale cask is dropping steadily, a good sign for the day's profits. Agnes emerges periodically from the kitchen, bearing plates of food or collecting empty tankards, her efficiency a thing of beauty to behold. They have worked together for so long, that they move around each other like dancers familiar with the steps, anticipating movements, avoiding collisions, maintaining the graceful flow of service that marks a well-run establishment. As midday approaches, Thomas makes his way outside to check on the small herb garden that grows alongside the inn's eastern wall. The garden is primarily Agnes's domain, but Thomas takes pleasure in these brief escapes into open air, especially on fair days when the sun warms his face and the breeze carries the scent of the surrounding countryside. The garden is a practical space rather than one designed for beauty, yet Thomas finds a particular charm in its ordered rows of culinary and medicinal herbs. Rosemary and thyme release their aromatic oils as his hand brushes against them. Sage stands tall and grey-green against the stone wall. Mint threatens to escape its designated area, always seeking to invade the space of more mannerly plants. The village spreads before him, a collection of timber-framed buildings with thatched roofs, smoke rising from chimneys, chickens scratching in the dirt between houses. Beyond the village lie the fields, now golden with ripening grain that sways gently in the breeze. The church bell rings out the hour, its bronze voice rolling across the landscape, marking the passage of time as it has for generations before Thomas was born and will continue to do long after he is gone. There is comfort in this continuity, this sense of being part of something larger and more enduring than one human life. Returning inside, Thomas finds the common room busy with the midday crowd. Labourers from the fields have come in for their main meal of the day, their faces bronzed by the sun, hands calloused from work. They sit together at the long tables, breaking bread, sharing news of the harvest, discussing the weather with the serious attention of those whose livelihood depends on it. Agnes has prepared a hearty pottage of root vegetables and barley, flavoured with herbs from the garden and enriched with scraps of salt pork. The aroma fills the common room, mingling with the scent of fresh bread and the earthy notes of ale. Thomas moves through the room, filling tankards, exchanging brief conversation with regulars, his ears always alert for news that might affect the inn or its patrons. A farmer mentions that the northern road is particularly muddy after yesterday's rain, information Thomas stores away, knowing it might explain delayed arrivals or weary travellers. A journeyman mason speaks of a new construction project at the manor house 3 miles distant. Perhaps there will be workers seeking accommodation in the coming weeks. Each piece of information is a thread in the tapestry of community life that Thomas has woven himself into over decades. As the afternoon progresses, the inn quiets briefly before the evening rush begins. Thomas takes this opportunity to check the guest rooms, ensuring they are ready for potential travellers. Each space is simple but clean. Floors swept, fresh straw laid where needed, linens checked for cleanliness. In the 2 better rooms, he places small bundles of dried lavender, both for their pleasant scent and for their reputed ability to discourage vermin. The windows are small and covered with oiled parchment rather than glass, allowing diffused light to enter while keeping out the worst of the elements. Thomas takes pride in maintaining standards that, while modest by the measure of great urban inns, offer comfort and cleanliness to those who seek shelter under his roof. Returning downstairs, he finds Eliza, the village weaver's 16-year-old daughter, has arrived to help with the evening service. She comes several times a week, earning a few pennies and occasionally taking home leftover food for her family. Her fingers, already calloused from working at the loom, now learn the arts of serving and clearing tables, of gauging a patron's needs often before they themselves are aware of them. Thomas watches her work with approval. She has a natural talent for this business, moving efficiently, remembering preferences, maintaining a pleasant demeanor even with difficult customers. Perhaps, he sometimes thinks, she might be interested in learning more of the innkeeper's trade, possibly even taking over when he grows too old to manage the daily demands. It is too soon to speak of such things, but the thought has begun to take root in his mind. The afternoon light begins to soften, shadows lengthening across the common room floor. Thomas adds more wood to the fire, preparing for the evening chill that will soon settle over the village. The door opens more frequently, now as villagers return from their day's labour, seeking food, drink, and companionship before retiring to their homes. Agnes's helper, a sturdy woman named Maud, has arrived to assist with the evening meal preparation. The kitchen now hums with increased activity, the chopping of vegetables, the sizzle of meat in iron pans, the rhythmic thud of dough being kneaded for tomorrow's bread. Through the open door, Thomas catches sight of movement on the northern road, a line of wagons approaching slowly, their wooden wheels creaking under the weight of goods. The merchant train has arrived. He quickly assesses the common room, mentally calculating available space, estimating how many travellers might need accommodation. He signals to Eliza to begin clearing the tables near the hearth, the prime spots that travellers will appreciate after a day on muddy roads. There is a particular energy that fills the inn whenever outsiders arrive, a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and the subtle excitement of potential stories and news from distant places. The first of the merchants enters, a broad-shouldered man whose fine woolen cloak bears the dust of many miles. Behind him come others, his apprentices, fellow merchants, the drivers of the wagons, guardsmen who travel with the valuable cargo. They bring with them the scents of the road: horse, sweat, leather, the particular dusty odour of well-travelled garments. Their voices fill the room with accents from other regions, their presence immediately transforming the familiar space into somewhere slightly exotic, a crossroads where worlds temporarily meet. "Welcome to the Crossroads Inn," Thomas says, the greeting worn smooth with years of use, yet still offered with genuine hospitality. "What can we provide for your comfort this evening?" The lead merchant, introducing himself as Barnabas of York, requests rooms for himself and his senior associates, space in the stable for their horses, secure storage for certain valuable goods, and food and drink for his entire company. Thomas absorbs these requests with the calm efficiency that has become his hallmark, assigning Eliza to show the principal travellers to their rooms while he discusses arrangements for the goods. With Barnabas, years of experience have taught him that merchants value security above almost all else. Their livelihood rides in those wagons, and peace of mind is worth paying extra for. Thomas offers the use of the small stone storeroom attached to the inn, its heavy door secured with an iron lock for items of particular value. As the evening deepens, the common room fills to capacity. The regular village patrons mix with the travellers, conversations growing louder as ale flows and the day's tensions begin to ease. Agnes and Maud bring out trays laden with the evening meal, a hearty stew of mutton and vegetables, loaves of dark bread still warm from the oven, rounds of cheese from a nearby dairy farm. The air fills with the mingled aromas of food, drink, pipe smoke, and the indefinable scent of human gathering, sweat, leather, wool, all combining into the particular atmosphere unique to gathering places throughout history. Thomas moves through the crowded room with practiced ease, his eyes constantly assessing who needs a refill, which conversations are becoming heated and might require intervention, where a subtle word might encourage a shy village youth to engage with the travellers, and perhaps learn something of the world beyond. He has a sixth sense for the mood of his establishment, developed over decades of careful observation. The inn is a living entity to him, with its own rhythms and tempers, and he is its keeper and guardian. Barnabas the merchant holds court at the centre table, his deep voice carrying tales of York's bustling markets, of news from London, of strange customs observed in coastal towns. The villagers listen with rapt attention, particularly the younger ones who may never travel more than 20 miles from their birthplace. Thomas notices Martin. The blacksmith's son has snuck in and sits cross-legged in a corner, eyes wide as he absorbs stories of a world he can scarcely imagine. Thomas pretends not to see the boy, knowing his father would likely disapprove of his presence in the inn after dark, but unwilling to deny him this rare glimpse of the broader world. As the evening wears on, one of the merchants produces a small harp from his belongings. A hush falls over the room as his fingers begin to dance across the strings, drawing forth a melody both familiar and somehow alien, a tune that speaks of distant places and ancient stories. Some of the villagers join in when the chorus returns, their voices rough but earnest, creating a moment of communion between locals and travellers. Thomas leans against the serving counter, allowing himself a moment to simply observe and appreciate this tableau. Faces illuminated by firelight, expressions animated by song and story, the eternal human ritual of gathering to share food, drink, and fellowship. It is in these moments that Thomas feels the full meaning of his chosen life's work. An inn is not merely a business selling food, drink, and lodging. It is a sanctuary of sorts, a neutral ground where differences can be temporarily set aside, where the rigid hierarchies of the outside world soften somewhat. Under his roof, the wealthy merchant might share a table with the village blacksmith, each finding common ground in their appreciation of well-brewed ale and a hearty meal. Stories flow alongside wine, creating connections that might otherwise never form. For travellers, the inn offers a temporary home in a world where the road is long and often perilous. For villagers, it provides a window to that same wider world, without the dangers of actual travel. As the night deepens, the common room gradually empties. Villagers return to their homes, guided by the light of the moon or simple rushlights if the night is dark. The travellers retire to their rooms or find spaces to unroll blankets in the common room if they are of lesser means. Thomas oversees the banking of the fire, not extinguishing it completely, but ensuring it will burn safely through the night, providing warmth and ready to be built up again in the morning. Eliza wipes down tables and collects the last of the tankards as Agnes and Maud complete the cleaning of the kitchen, preparing it for tomorrow's labours. Thomas performs his final ritual of the day, a careful check of the entire inn. He secures the main door with a heavy wooden bar, checks that shutters are properly closed against the night air, ensures the valuable goods of the merchants are safely locked away. The building creaks and settles around him, the familiar sounds of timber and stone adjusting to the cooling night temperatures. He pauses at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the occasional snore or murmur from the rooms above, feeling a sense of responsibility for each soul sleeping under his roof this night. In his own small chamber, Thomas finally allows the weariness of the day to settle into his bones. He removes his jerkin and boots, splashes water on his face and hands from the basin, and sinks onto the edge of his bed. The mattress yields beneath him, conforming to the shape his body has impressed upon it over countless nights. Through the small window, he can see stars scattered across the velvet darkness, eternal and unchanging, witnesses to the brief span of human lives played out beneath their cold light. Thomas thinks of the day just past, the visitors who have come and gone, the conversations shared, the meals served, the small dramas and comedies enacted within the walls of his establishment. Tomorrow will bring variations on these same themes, and the day after that, and so on, until his strength fails or he passes the inn to younger hands. There is both comfort and melancholy in this knowledge. His life is circumscribed by these walls, yet within that seemingly narrow compass lies a world of human experience, as vast and varied as any to be found in royal courts or on distant battlefields. As sleep begins to claim him, Thomas's thoughts drift to the young girl Eliza and her obvious aptitude for the innkeeper's trade. Perhaps, he thinks hazily, as consciousness begins to slip away, perhaps there is a future where the inn continues beyond his stewardship, where the traditions and standards he has maintained find new expression through her hands. The thought brings a smile to his lips as he surrenders to sleep, the distant sound of the night watchman calling the hour barely penetrating his awareness. The Crossroads Inn stands quiet now, a haven of rest in a hard world, waiting for dawn to bring new travellers, new stories, and the eternal cycle of welcome and farewell that is the innkeeper's lot. As Thomas finds his rest after a day of dutiful service, let us turn our gaze to another inn, nestled in the rolling hills where the great northern road meets the river path. Here, a woman named Eleanor has carved out her place in a world that rarely makes space for female innkeepers. Her story unfolds during the autumn fair, when her modest establishment transforms into the heart of celebration and commerce. Morning mist clings to the valley like a lover reluctant to leave, veiling the river's rest in a soft, pearlescent glow. Eleanor stands at the threshold of her establishment, her hands resting on hips that have grown wider with the passing of 46 summers. The wooden sign above her head, a carved image of a boat drawn up beside a cup of ale, swings. Gently in the autumn breeze, the creaking of its iron hinges a sound so familiar she scarcely notices it anymore. Her eyes, the deep brown of fertile earth, survey the courtyard where preparations for the annual Michaelmas Fair are already underway. The fair has been held on these grounds for as long as anyone can remember, drawing merchants, craftspeople, and revelers from villages and towns for miles around. And the responsibility of hosting such an event sits on Eleanor's shoulders like a mantle she has grown accustomed to wearing. The inn itself stands 2 stories tall, its timber frame darkened with age, walls of wattle and daub that Eleanor has. Her workers refresh with new whitewash each spring. Unlike most establishments of its kind, the river's rest came to her directly rather than through a husband, an inheritance from her father, who raised her to pull a perfect pint and keep meticulous accounts with equal skill. Many had doubted that a woman could maintain such an establishment, particularly one situated at an important crossroads where travellers of all sorts seek accommodation. 23 years of successful management have silenced most critics, though Eleanor occasionally still encounters a merchant or nobleman who looks past her to address her male staff, as if a woman couldn't possibly be the proprietor of such a thriving business. This morning, however, her authority is unquestioned, as she directs the placement of trestle tables and benches in the courtyard. The Michaelmas Fair will bring more customers than the common room can possibly hold, and experience has taught Eleanor to extend her hospitality outdoors when weather permits. The sky above promises a fair day. High, thin clouds sailing across a sea of autumn blue, the sun already burning away the morning mist. The air carries the first hints of the season's change, a certain crispness that speaks of harvests completed and winter's approach, the smoky scent of distant hearth fires, mingling with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. Within the courtyard walls, activity increases with each passing moment. 2 of Eleanor's serving men, Thomas and Gregory, arrange the heavy wooden tables in neat rows, their movements synchronized by years of working together. Near the courtyard's far wall, Warren the cook and his assistants have constructed a temporary roasting pit, where a whole pig will soon be turning on a spit, its fat dripping and sizzling on the coals below. The smell of roasting meat will draw fairgoers like a lodestone throughout the day. Other staff members roll barrels of ale from the cellar, positioning them strategically around the courtyard, ready to be tapped when thirst demands and coins are offered. Eleanor's daughter, Marjorie, emerges from the inn's main door, her arms laden with clean linen cloths to cover the tables. At 18, she is the image of what Eleanor was at that age. The same earth-brown eyes, the same determined set to her jaw, the same practical intelligence that assesses situations and finds solutions. Eleanor feels a familiar swell of pride mingled with apprehension as she watches her daughter efficiently organizing the younger serving girls. Marjorie has grown up in this inn, learning its operations as naturally as she learned to walk and talk, and she shows every sign of following in her mother's footsteps. Yet Eleanor sometimes wonders if she should wish a different life for her only child. Perhaps marriage to a prosperous merchant or guildsman, a life with less toil and more security than an innkeeper can expect. Such thoughts are quickly set aside as Eleanor's attention is drawn to the arrival of the first merchants' wagons at the courtyard gate. They come earlier each year, eager to claim the best positions for their stalls and booths. The Michaelmas Fair officially begins tomorrow, but experience has taught Eleanor that fair days extend both backward and forward from their official boundaries, like water overflowing the banks of a stream. She moves to greet the newcomers, her stride purposeful, her expression one of composed welcome that reveals nothing of the calculations already running through her mind. How many will need lodging? How much ale and food will be consumed, which merchants might become difficult if not handled with the right mixture of firmness and diplomacy. "Mistress Eleanor," calls out a familiar voice. It belongs to Jasper, a cloth merchant from York, whose annual appearance at the fair has become as reliable as the changing of seasons. His wagon is loaded with bolts of fabric, wool in various weights and dyes, some linen for those who can afford it, even a small selection of silk and fine cotton for the truly wealthy or extravagant. "I've brought something special for your inspection this year," he announces, his round face breaking into a smile that crinkles the sun-weathered skin around his eyes. Eleanor returns the smile, allowing herself a moment of genuine pleasure at seeing an old acquaintance. Jasper has been coming to her inn for 15 years, and over time their relationship has evolved beyond mere innkeeper and guest. He always brings news from York and the larger world beyond, information as valuable to Eleanor as the coin he pays for his lodging and meals. "Show me after you've settled in," she replies, gesturing toward a space near the eastern wall of the courtyard. "Your usual spot is waiting for you." This small courtesy, remembering a merchant's preferred location, costs her nothing but earns immeasurable goodwill. As more wagons arrive, the courtyard transforms from an empty space into a bustling marketplace in the making. Merchants and craftspeople begin setting up their stalls, unloading goods protected from the journey by layers of cloth and straw. The sounds of commerce fill the air, hammers striking nails as booths are constructed, the creak of wagon wheels, voices calling, greetings and instructions, occasional bursts of laughter or good-natured argument about boundary lines between neighbouring stalls. Dust rises from the packed earth of the courtyard, golden motes dancing in the strengthening sunlight. Eleanor moves through this growing maze with practiced ease, greeting regular visitors by name, welcoming newcomers, mediating minor disputes before they can grow into serious conflicts. Her manner is firm but fair, her decisions respected because they are consistent and practical. When young Willem, an apprentice pewtersmith, attempts to claim more space than his master has paid for, Eleanor corrects him with a gentle firmness that leaves no room for argument but causes no loss of face. When Goodwife Thatcher complains that the soap seller's stall is too close to her candle-making display, Eleanor rearranges the boundary markers slightly, finding a compromise that satisfies both parties. Meanwhile, inside the inn itself, preparations continue for what will certainly be the busiest 3 days of the year. Every available space has been cleaned, every cup and bowl checked for cracks or damage. Extra mattresses stuffed with fresh straw have been prepared for those who will pay for floor space in the common room when proper beds are filled. The large cooking hearth in the kitchen blazes constantly, warming pots of pottage and stew that will simmer throughout the day, ready to serve to hungry customers at a moment's notice. The air inside is thick with the mingled aromas of baking bread, simmering onions, herbs hanging from the rafters to dry, and the particular dusty scent that rises from rushes freshly strewn across the floor. Eleanor checks each room in turn, her critical eye noting any imperfection that requires attention. A loose shutter hinge here, a spot of dampness on a wall there that suggests the thatch above might need repair before winter truly sets in. She makes mental notes of tasks that can wait until after the fair, focusing now only on what must be addressed immediately. In the largest guest chamber, reserved for wealthy merchants or occasionally minor nobility, she straightens the woolen coverlet on the bed and adjusts the linen hangings that provide both privacy and a small measure of insulation against drafts. The mattress, stuffed with sweet herbs and clean straw, has been recently remade. The chamber pot beneath the bed is clean and partially filled with fresh water, a small courtesy that those who can afford this room have come to expect. Down in the cellar, Eleanor inspects the ale stocks with particular attention. Beer is the lifeblood of any inn, and the quality of Eleanor's brews is renowned throughout the region. Barrels are stacked against the cool stone walls, each marked with a symbol indicating its contents and when it was brewed. The everyday ale for common folk, the stronger beer for those willing to pay a premium, the special dark brew prepared specifically for the Michaelmas celebrations, and even a few barrels of imported wine for particularly discerning guests. Eleanor taps one barrel lightly, listening to the sound it makes to judge how full it remains. Her calculations suggest they have sufficient stock for the fair, but experience has taught her that unexpected events can always arise. A particularly hot day that drives up consumption, a large group of travelers arriving unannounced, a wealthy merchant deciding to treat all comers to a round. Returning to the courtyard, Eleanor finds that the temporary roasting pit is now fully operational. The pig turning slowly on its spit, tended by Warren's youngest apprentice, who sweats in the heat despite the coolness of the autumn air. The first tantalizing aromas of roasting meat begin to drift across the courtyard, drawing appreciative comments from the merchants still setting up their stalls. Eleanor makes a quick inspection, ensuring that the fire is properly contained, and that the boy knows to call for help if anything seems amiss. A fire in the crowded courtyard would be disastrous, potentially destroying not only her livelihood, but the valuable goods of dozens of merchants as well. Safety is a constant concern for any innkeeper, but particularly during events like the fair, when normal routines are disrupted and large numbers of strangers gather in close proximity. By midday, the transformation of the River's Rest is complete. What was, just yesterday, a modest country inn with a spacious courtyard has become the heart of a temporary village of commerce and celebration. Colourful awnings extend from stall fronts, providing shade for goods and customers alike. Merchants arrange their wares with artistic care, bolts of cloth displayed to show off their colours and textures, metalwork catching and reflecting the sunlight, baskets of apples and pears stacked in pyramids of autumnal abundance. The air fills with the mingled sense of food, animals, people, and goods from distant places, exotic spices, tanned leather, beeswax, new wool still carrying the lanolin scent of the sheep it came from. Though the fair officially begins tomorrow, commerce waits for no official proclamation. Already, the early arrivals, both merchants and the more eager local folk, engage in the ancient dance of buying and selling. Voices rise in the practiced cadence of haggling. Coins change hands. Goods are wrapped in cloth or straw for protection on the journey home. Eleanor observes from the inn's doorway, calculating the pattern of the day by the movement of people through the spaces she knows so well. Soon, she thinks, the midday hunger will drive many toward her tables, seeking food and drink to sustain them through the afternoon's activities. As if summoned by her thoughts, the first customers approach the outdoor serving area. Eleanor signals to Thomas and Gregory, who immediately begin filling tankards from the nearest barrel of ale. Marjorie and the other serving girls emerge from the kitchen, bearing platters of bread, cheese, and sliced cold meats. Simple fare that can be prepared quickly to meet the initial demand. The more substantial meals will come later, as Warren's creations reach completion in the kitchen and the pig on the spit attains the perfect state of succulent doneness. Eleanor herself moves behind the temporary serving counter established in the courtyard, personally pouring ale for those she recognizes as regular customers or particularly important visitors. This personal touch is part of what has made her unsuccessful. The sense that the proprietor knows you, values your custom, remembers what you prefer to drink, and what news might interest you particularly. A merchant from London receives a question about his wife's health, remembered from a conversation 6 months earlier. A local guildsman is congratulated on his daughter's recent marriage. A travelling minstrel is asked if he has composed any new ballads since his last visit. Each interaction is brief but genuine, creating bonds that ensure these customers will return to the river's rest rather than seeking accommodation elsewhere. As the day progresses, Eleanor watches the rhythms of the growing fair with the practiced eye of one who has witnessed this annual event for decades. Children dart between stalls, wide-eyed at the display of goods from distant places. Village women gather in clusters to examine fabric, comparing quality and price with serious expressions, occasionally breaking into laughter at some shared joke or observation. Men congregate near the ale barrels, discussing the harvest just completed, the prospects for winter, the news of political developments in the wider world. Merchants call out their wares, each developing a particular chant or pitch designed to draw attention to their particular offerings. By late afternoon, the inn's common room is as crowded as the courtyard, filled with those seeking respite from the strengthening autumn wind that has begun to gust through the fairground. Eleanor makes her way through the packed space, astutely, judging which tables might need another round of drinks, which customers might be approaching the point where they should be gently discouraged from consuming more, which conversations might be developing into arguments that require intervention. The air inside is warm and thick with the sense of bodies, ale, and the herbs strewn among the rushes on the floor. Mint and lavender releasing their fragrance when crushed underfoot, helping to mask less pleasant odors. Near the large hearth fire, a group of local craftsmen engage in an increasingly heated discussion about taxation and the rights of their guilds. Eleanor pauses nearby, seemingly occupied with straightening a stack of wooden bowls, but actually listening carefully to gauge whether the conversation might turn truly contentious. The innkeeper's role often extends beyond providing food and shelter. Maintaining peace among guests is essential to the reputation and success of the establishment. Eleanor has developed a particular skill for knowing when to let conversations run their natural course, and when to intervene with a well-timed question or suggestion that diffuses tension before it erupts into something more dangerous. As she suspected it might, the craftsman's discussion begins to grow louder, voices rising as positions become more entrenched. Eleanor approaches their table with a pitcher of her special Michaelmas ale, a brew dark and rich with hints of honey and spices. "Gentlemen," she says, her voice pitched to carry beneath the general din of the common room, "I've been saving this cask for tomorrow's official opening, but perhaps you'd honor me by giving your opinion on this year's special brew." The interruption achieves exactly what she intended. A moment's pause in the argument, a shift in attention, an opportunity for heated minds to cool slightly. As she pours the rich amber liquid into their cups, the conversation gradually turns to appreciation of the ale's qualities, the previous dispute temporarily forgotten if not resolved. Outside, the light begins to fade as afternoon yields to evening. Merchants cover their wares or bring the most valuable items inside for safekeeping overnight. Torches and lanterns are lit around the courtyard, creating pools of golden light that push back against the gathering darkness. The pig that has been roasting all day is finally deemed ready, its skin crackling and burnished to a rich mahogany color, the meat beneath tender and flavorful. Warren supervises as his assistants begin to carve portions, serving them alongside bread and a thick sauce made from apples and onions. The aroma draws a line of eager customers, coins already in hand. Eleanor makes her way back outside, pausing to observe the scene from the inn's threshold. The transformation of her property continues, from morning's empty courtyard to midday's bustling marketplace, to evening's place of communal gathering. Lanterns hung from poles cast their light over the tables where people now sit in groups, sharing food, drink, and conversation. From somewhere in the crowd, music begins, a simple pipe and tabor played by a wandering musician who has found an appreciative audience. Soon, others join in with their own instruments or voices, creating an impromptu performance that spreads a sense of celebration through the gathering. As darkness deepens, Eleanor's attention turns to security arrangements for the night. The Michaelmas Fair, while primarily a joyful occasion, can also attract those with less honorable intentions, thieves drawn by the concentration of goods, and money, troublemakers seeking opportunities in the general revelry. She confers briefly with Hugh, a broad-shouldered former soldier who serves as the inn's main protector during such events. Together, they review the placement of the 2 additional men hired specifically to keep watch through the night. One will patrol the courtyard, where some merchants choose to sleep near their wares rather than pay for accommodation inside. Another will watch the stables and outbuildings where animals and additional goods are stored. Hugh himself will maintain vigilance over the inn proper, his imposing presence usually sufficient to discourage most potential disturbances. With security arrangements confirmed, Eleanor returns to the common room, which has now reached the peak of its evening activity. Every table is occupied, every bench filled to capacity. The air has grown thick and warm from the press of bodies, the large fire in the hearth, and the countless candles and rushlights that illuminate the space. Serving girls weave expertly through the crowd, balancing trays of filled tankards above their heads to avoid the gesticulating hands of animated storytellers or the occasional embrace of friends reuniting after long separation. The noise level has risen to a constant roar. Dozens of conversations happening simultaneously, punctuated by bursts of laughter, the clatter of wooden tableware, occasional snippets of song. In one corner, Jasper the cloth merchant has claimed a table where he holds court, surrounded by local worthies eager for news from York and beyond. His hands move expressively as he describes some political intrigue involving guild disputes in the northern city. Eleanor catches fragments of his tale as she passes, something about the wool merchants' guild and accusations of price fixing, the kind of distant drama that provides entertainment value without directly affecting the lives of his listeners. She notes with approval that he has purchased her best wine rather than the everyday ale, a choice that reflects both his prosperity and his appreciation for the finer offerings of her establishment. Near the hearth, a different kind of gathering has formed around an elderly man whose deeply lined face suggests decades spent in the open air. He speaks more quietly than Jasper, forcing his listeners to lean in close, creating an atmosphere of intimacy despite the surrounding noise. Eleanor recognizes him as a wandering herbalist who visits the region annually, trading remedies and knowledge gathered from a lifetime of study. Such figures occupy a precarious position in village life, respected for their knowledge, yet sometimes viewed with suspicion for the same reason. Eleanor makes a mental note to speak with him privately before he leaves. Her storage of medicinal herbs could use replenishing, and his expertise in identifying the most effective specimens is unmatched in her experience. As the evening wears on, Eleanor finds herself drawn into conversation with various guests. A brief exchange here about the quality of this year's apple harvest. A longer discussion there regarding news of a new tax being considered by the king's advisors. A quiet moment of condolence with a village woman whose husband passed during the summer months. Each interaction requires a different aspect of her personality. The knowledgeable agriculturalist, the concerned citizen, the compassionate neighbor. Years of practice have made these transitions nearly seamless, though sometimes Eleanor wonders if anyone truly knows all the facets of her nature, or if she has become so adept at being what others need that her true self has become obscured even to her own perception. Such philosophical musings are interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected group at the inn's door. 5 men, their clothing marking them as minor nobility or wealthy merchants, enter with the confident air of those accustomed to deference. Their leader, a tall man, whose cloak is lined with what appears to be marten fur, surveys the crowded room with an expression suggesting he finds it somewhat beneath his usual standards, but acceptable under the circumstances. Eleanor moves quickly to greet them, recognizing the potential for both profit and trouble that such visitors represent. Wealthy guests pay well, but often expect accommodations and service that a country inn may struggle to provide, particularly one already stretched to capacity by fair preparations. "Welcome to the River's Rest," she says, adopting the more formal manner she reserves for such occasions. "I am Eleanor, the proprietor. How may we serve you this evening?" The tall man introduces himself as Sir William, a knight returning from business at the King's Court, now travelling with his retinue to his estates some 30 miles north. A broken wheel on their carriage has forced them to seek accommodation for the night, while repairs are made in the village. His tone carries the unspoken assumption that rooms will be made available despite the obvious crowding of the inn. Eleanor mentally reviews the inn's current occupancy. Every proper bed is claimed, many by merchants who have long-standing arrangements for the fair period. To displace them would damage relationships built over many years. Yet turning away a man of Sir William's standing could also have consequences. She makes a swift calculation and offers a solution. Her own private chamber, rarely shown to guests, can be prepared for Sir William himself. His men can be accommodated in the common room, where space will be made near the hearth, the warmest and most comfortable location for those sleeping on the floor. The offer appears to satisfy Sir William, particularly when Eleanor mentions that she has a small quantity of French wine, reserved for special guests that she would be honored to serve with his evening meal. The mention of wine from the continent visibly raises his estimation of the establishment. With a nod, he accepts the arrangement, instructing his men to bring in their travel chests. Eleanor immediately signals to Marjorie, communicating with the subtle gestures they have developed over years of working together. Her daughter understands instantly what is needed, moving off to prepare the private chamber and arrange space in the common room. With Sir William's party settled as comfortably as circumstances allow, Eleanor returns to the general supervision of her domain. The evening has reached that particular point where decisions must be made about continued service. Certain patrons showing signs that they have consumed sufficient ale for their own good and the peace of the establishment. Others, clearly settled in for a long night of drinking and conversation. With a practiced eye, Eleanor identifies those who should be gently encouraged to consider their beds, signaling to Thomas and Gregory, who understand exactly what is required without explicit instruction. Outside in the courtyard, the celebration continues but has begun to quiet somewhat as the hour grows late and the autumn chill deepens. Families with children have mostly departed for their homes in the surrounding village, leaving primarily adult revelers who cluster near the remaining fire pits for warmth and companionship. The music has evolved from earlier exuberant dance tunes to slower, more reflective ballads. A travelling minstrel with a clear tenor voice sings of unrequited love, his lyrics speaking of longing that spans seasons and distances, touching something universal in his listeners, whose faces appear thoughtful in the flickering firelight. Eleanor pauses in her rounds to listen, the familiar words of the ballad stirring memories long undisturbed. There was a time, many years ago, when she might have pursued a different path. Martin the carpenter's son had courted her with sweet words and gentle attention, offering the possibility of a conventional life as a craftsman's wife. She had chosen, instead, to follow her father in the innkeeper's trade, a decision that brought independence, but also a certain solitude that even her beloved daughter's presence doesn't entirely dispel. The minstrel's song speaks to that private corner of her heart, where old choices and their consequences reside, neither regretted nor forgotten. The moment of reflection passes as quickly as it arose, banished by the practical demands of the present. A minor dispute has broken out between two merchants regarding the placing of overnight guards near their valuable goods. Eleanor moves to mediate, her manner calm but authoritative. The issue is resolved with a slight rearrangement of sleeping arrangements and a reminder that her own hired watchman will make regular rounds throughout the night. Such small conflicts are inevitable during the fair, with so many people from different regions and backgrounds brought together in close proximity, each protective of their livelihood and possessions. As midnight approaches, the common room has begun to empty somewhat, though a substantial core of dedicated drinkers and socializers remains. Eleanor consults briefly with Marjorie regarding the final preparations for morning, when breakfast must be ready early to accommodate merchants, eager to finish setting up before the official opening of the fair. Together they review the supplies of bread, cheese and ale set aside for the morning meal, making adjustments based on the unexpected arrival of Sir William's party and estimates of how many others might rise early seeking sustenance. Their planning is interrupted by a commotion at the inn's door. Raised voices, one clearly distressed. Eleanor moves quickly to investigate, finding a young woman supporting an elderly man who clutches his chest, his face contorted in pain. "My father," the woman explains breathlessly. "He collapsed just outside. We were returning to our village, but cannot continue with him in this state." Eleanor takes immediate action, calling for assistance to bring the man inside and settle him near the hearth where the warmth might bring some comfort. She sends Marjorie to fetch the herbalist from his conversation group, knowing his skills might prove useful before proper medical attention can be obtained. The inn has no designated sick room, but a quiet corner of the common room is quickly cleared. Benches arranged to form a makeshift bed where the elderly man can lie flat. The herbalist arrives promptly, his earlier storytelling forgotten as he shifts into the role of healer. His gnarled hands move with surprising gentleness, examining the elderly man while asking quiet questions of his daughter. Eleanor provides clean linens, a cup of her strongest spirits to be used both as potential medicine and for cleaning hands, and water freshly drawn from the well. Around this small drama, the common room continues its evening activities, though in a somewhat subdued fashion, conversations continuing but in lower tones, respectful of the situation unfolding in their midst. The herbalist's diagnosis is delivered quietly to Eleanor and the man's daughter. Age and a weakened heart, exacerbated by the excitement of the fair preparations and the cool night air. He prepares a tincture from materials in the leather pouch he carries always at his belt, administering it drop by drop between the elderly man's pale lips. Rest is what he needs most, the herbalist advises, and warmth. Movement now would be dangerous. Eleanor makes another swift calculation. Every bed is accounted for, every corner of floor space in the common room assigned for the night. Then she makes the decision that typifies her approach to innkeeping. Practical compassion balanced with business necessity. He can rest in my private room, she tells the daughter, having already determined that she will sleep on a pallet in Marjorie's small chamber instead. Sir William has been given her formal guest room, but her own modest sleeping quarters will serve for the sick man's needs. Such adjustments are part of the innkeeper's life. Flexibility in the face of unpredictable human circumstances. Finding solutions that maintain both the functioning of the establishment and its reputation for hospitality. With the elderly man settled as comfortably as possible, and his daughter keeping vigil beside him, Eleanor returns to the common room where the night's activities have begun their natural decline. Those planning to rise early for the fair's opening are seeking their beds, while the dedicated night owls cluster closer to the hearth, their voices growing more philosophical as ale continues to flow and the hour grows later. She checks that sufficient candles and rushlights remain for safe navigation through the darkened spaces, that water is available for those who will wake thirsty in the night, that the fire is built up sufficiently to maintain warmth until morning without requiring constant attention. In the courtyard, only the hardiest revelers remain, huddled near the last fire pit where embers glow orange in the darkness. Hugh stands watchful nearby, his presence ensuring that celebrations remain peaceful as night deepens. The temporary village of merchant stalls lies quiet now, goods covered against dew and potential rain, occasionally illuminated by the passing lantern of a watchman making his rounds. The autumn sky above has cleared of clouds, revealing a canopy of stars and a waning moon that casts subtle silver light across the scene. Eleanor completes her final inspection of the inn's public spaces, moving with the quiet efficiency of long practice. Spills are wiped, fallen rushes straightened, a forgotten cloak collected to be claimed by its owner in the morning. In the kitchen, she checks that the banked fire in the cooking hearth poses no danger, that stores are secured against nocturnal scavengers, both animal and human, that all is prepared for the early start that dawn will bring. These rituals of closing have become so ingrained over the years that she performs them almost without conscious thought, her body moving through the familiar patterns while her mind is already turning to tomorrow's challenges. Finally, with the public spaces secured, and the late-night drinkers settled in for their long vigil by the hearth, Eleanor makes her way to Marjorie's chamber. Her daughter has already prepared a pallet on the floor, giving up half her small bed in protest, until Eleanor insisted that one of them at least should sleep properly to be fresh for tomorrow's demands. As she settles onto the makeshift bed, Eleanor allows herself to feel the weariness that she has been holding at bay through the long day. Her body aches from constant movement, her voice rough from hours of conversation over the noise of the crowded inn, her mind still racing with mental lists of tasks completed and those yet to come. In the darkness, Marjorie's voice comes softly from the bed. "Mother, do you ever wish for a different life, one with more rest and less worry?" The question catches Eleanor by surprise, echoing as it does her own brief moment of reflection during the minstrel's song earlier in the evening. She considers her answer carefully, wanting to offer her daughter honesty without unduly influencing choices she may yet make about her own future. "There are moments," she admits, "when the burden feels heavy. Days when difficult guests or poor harvests or unexpected repairs make me question the path I've chosen." She pauses, organizing her thoughts in the darkness. But then there are also days like today, when the inn becomes something more than just a place of business, when it becomes the heart of something larger, a place where lives intersect and memories are formed. Those days remind me why this life, with all its challenges, remains worth the effort. Marjorie is silent for a long moment, and Eleanor wonders if sleep has claimed her daughter before she could hear the answer. Then the young woman speaks again, her voice thoughtful in the darkness. "I've been watching Sir William and his men tonight. They've travelled far, seen places and people we can only imagine. There's a whole world beyond our village, beyond this inn." Eleanor feels a tightening in her chest, not quite pain, but an awareness that change may be coming in ways she hasn't anticipated. "Yes," she agrees softly. "There is a vast world out there, and if you wish to see it someday, I would not stand in your way." The words cost her something to say, but she means them sincerely. Her own choices were made freely. Her daughter deserves the same freedom. "I don't know what I wish yet," Marjorie confesses, her voice drifting towards sleep. "But I'm grateful that you believe I could choose." Eleanor lies awake long after Marjorie's breathing has deepened into sleep, her mind filled with thoughts of choices made and those yet to come. Outside, the sounds of the night provide a gentle backdrop to her reflections. The occasional call of an owl, the soft laughter of the last revellers making their way to bed, the reassuring tread of the watchman passing by on his rounds. The river's rest settles around her, creaking and sighing as old buildings do when the temperature drops and timbers contract. Tomorrow will bring the official opening of the Michaelmas Fair, with all its attendant demands and opportunities. Eleanor will rise before dawn, as she has done nearly every day of her adult life, to ensure that her establishment meets those demands and capitalizes on those opportunities. She will oversee the preparation of breakfast for dozens, the cleaning of the common room, the replenishment of ale barrels, the countless small tasks that collectively ensure the inn's reputation remains intact or even enhanced by its performance during these crucial days. But for now, in these quiet hours between one busy day and the next, Eleanor allows herself to simply be, not the innkeeper, not the businesswoman, not the mediator of disputes or the solver of problems, but simply a woman of middle years reflecting on a life shaped by thousands of small decisions and a few large ones. Sleep begins to claim her at last, her thoughts growing less distinct, merging with fragments of memory and anticipation as consciousness gradually yields to dreams. Her last coherent thought before surrendering to slumber is a simple one. Whatever tomorrow may bring, the river's rest will stand ready to receive it, as it has done for generations before her stewardship, and will continue to do, perhaps under Marjorie's guidance, or that of someone yet unknown when Eleanor's time has passed. Dawn arrives with a subtle shift in the quality of darkness, a gradual lightening from black to grey to the muted gold of early morning. Eleanor wakes as she always does, moments before she would need to, her body's internal rhythms so attuned to the inn's needs that artificial measures like cockcrow or church bells are unnecessary prompts. For a momentary interval between sleep and full wakefulness, she experiences disorientation at finding herself on the floor of Marjorie's room rather than in her own familiar bed. Then memory returns, the elderly traveller, her decision to surrender her chamber, the conversation with her daughter in the darkness. Rising quietly to avoid waking Marjorie, who can benefit from another hour's rest before the day's demands begin in earnest, Eleanor straightens her clothing and runs fingers through her hair, securing the greying strands in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Her movements are practiced and efficient, minimizing noise, maximizing function. Outside the small window, the courtyard lies quiet and mist-covered, the merchant stalls indistinct shapes in the pre-dawn greyness. Soon those shapes will become a riot of colour and activity. But for now, the world seems suspended in breathless anticipation of the day to come. Eleanor's first task, as always, is to check the great hearthfire in the common room. She finds it much as expected, reduced to glowing embers that need only fresh fuel and attention to burst back into active flame. Several figures lie wrapped in blankets on the floor nearby, some of Sir William's men among them, their soft snoring providing a bass note to the quiet morning. She works quickly but quietly, adding kindling and then larger pieces of wood to the fire, careful not to create unnecessary noise that might disturb the sleepers. As the flames grow, pushing back the morning chill, she allows herself a moment of simple appreciation for this daily rebirth of warmth and light, a small miracle repeated so often that many never pause to recognize its wonder. In the kitchen, she finds Warren already at work, his massive frame moving with the surprising grace of a man who knows his domain intimately. Loaves of bread shaped the night before are ready for the oven, their risen domes covered with linen cloths. A large pot of pottage simmers at the edge of the cooking hearth, filled with grains and dried beans that have soaked overnight now, slowly transforming into the morning porridge that will form the base of many breakfasts. Warren acknowledges Eleanor with a nod, but doesn't interrupt his work. Their relationship has evolved over a decade to the point where conversation is often unnecessary, understanding conveyed through gesture and shared experience. Eleanor checks the stores of ale and wine, ensuring sufficient quantities are readily available for immediate serving when the first customers appear seeking morning refreshment. The small beer, weakest and cheapest of the inn's offerings, will be in highest demand during breakfast, its mild nature and low alcohol content making it appropriate for early consumption. She arranges cups and bowls near the serving hatch, mentally calculating how many patrons might descend upon the common room in the first rush of morning appetites. As she completes these preparations, the inn gradually begins to wake around her. Floorboards creak overhead as guests rise and prepare for the day. The first serving girls arrive from their homes in the village, tying aprons around their waists and smoothing hair beneath simple caps. Gregory appears from the stable yard, reporting that all is well with the guests' horses and the valuable goods stored in outbuildings overnight. The rhythm of the inn's awakening is as familiar to Eleanor as her own heartbeat, a daily resurrection of purpose and activity that forms the framework of her existence. Her thoughts turn to the elderly man currently occupying her chamber, and she makes her way there to check on his condition. She finds him awake, his colour somewhat improved from the alarming pallor of the previous evening. His daughter, who has clearly spent the night in the hard wooden chair beside the bed, looks exhausted but manages a smile of greeting. The herbalist's remedy appears to have brought some relief, though the man remains weak and short of breath, with even minor exertion. After a brief consultation, Eleanor arranges for a light breakfast to be brought to the room and promises to send word to the village priest, who sometimes has knowledge of healing as well as spiritual matters. Returning to the common room, she finds it transformed from its nighttime quietude to morning industry. Tables have been wiped clean, benches positioned, fresh rushes strewn across the floor where needed. The room fills gradually with guests seeking breakfast before the fair begins in earnest. Merchants eager to complete final arrangements at their stalls, villagers who have travelled from outlying areas and spent the night at the inn, rather than making the journey twice, wealthy visitors like Sir William, who maintain their usual schedules regardless of location. The fair's official opening will occur at mid-morning, marked by the ringing of the church bell and a brief ceremony performed by the village bailiff. Until then, a strange liminality hangs over the proceedings. Not quite normal day, not yet full celebration. Eleanor uses this time to make final inspections of the courtyard arrangements, ensuring that serving tables are positioned optimally, that ale barrels are properly elevated on their stands to allow for easy dispensing, that seating is arranged to facilitate both conversation and efficient service. Each detail has been considered and reconsidered, informed by years of experience with this annual event and the particular needs it presents. As she completes her rounds, Eleanor pauses at the courtyard gate, looking beyond to the village now fully illuminated by the rising sun. People move purposefully along the main street, carrying baskets or leading animals, all converging on the fairground adjacent to the inn. From distant farms and neighbouring villages they come, drawn by the opportunity to purchase goods otherwise unavailable, to sell their own products, to engage in the complex social exchanges that are as much a part of the fair as its commercial aspects. Eleanor feels a moment of pride in her role within this ancient cycle of gathering and dispersal, her inn standing as a fixed point around which these temporary communities form and dissolve. The church bell rings out, its voice carrying across village and countryside, announcing the hour and soon to proclaim the fair's official commencement. Eleanor straightens her apron, runs a hand over her hair to ensure its neatness, and prepares to meet whatever the day may bring with the same composed competence that has carried her through decades of innkeeping. The Michaelmas Fair has begun, in earnest, and the River's Rest stands ready, as it has for generations, to offer hospitality to all who seek it, a place of temporary belonging in a world where much is uncertain, but the need for food, drink, shelter, and human connection remains constant. As the Michaelmas Fair reaches its crescendo around Eleanor's bustling inn, let us journey northward, where winter's early grip has already begun to transform the landscape. There stands another inn, smaller, more isolated, where an innkeeper named Cedric faces challenges not of prosperity, but of survival through the harshest season. Snow falls in silent benediction upon the wayfarer's rest, each flake a perfect crystal dissolved into the growing blanket of white that encases the small inn. Cedric watches through the single glass window of the common room, a luxury he had traded 4 fine wool blankets to acquire 3 summers past. His weathered face, lined with 48 years of northern winters, remains impassive, though his eyes, grey as the storm clouds, betray concern that he would never voice aloud. The early winter has caught everyone unprepared. The last leaves had barely surrendered to autumn when the first snow began. And now, a fortnight before the feast of St. Martin, the world lies transformed into a landscape both beautiful and treacherous. For travellers caught on the road, such unseasonable weather can mean the difference between life and death. For an innkeeper whose livelihood depends on those same travellers, it presents a complex equation of responsibility and survival. The Wayfarer's Rest stands alone at a crossroads, where the north-south trading route intersects with the lesser path leading to the coast. In fairer seasons, this position brings a steady stream of merchants, pilgrims, and occasional nobility to Cedric's door. The inn itself is modest compared to the great establishments found in towns and cities, yet it has earned a reputation for cleanliness, honest measure, and the particular hearty stew that Cedric's wife Edith prepares, according to a recipe guarded as carefully as any family treasure. The building hunkers low against the landscape, its thick stone walls and heavy thatch designed to withstand the region's notorious winter storms. Now those same features make it appear almost part of the snowscape itself, only the smoke rising from the central chimney, distinguishing it from a natural formation in the white expanse. Inside, the common room stands nearly empty, an unusual state for even the quietest of normal days. Only 2 guests currently shelter within the Wayfarer's walls: a merchant of middle years, whose wagon had lost a wheel a mile south of the inn, and a young monk travelling north to take up new duties at a monastery near the Scottish border. Both men sit near the generous hearth fire, hands wrapped around wooden cups of mulled cider, their earlier conversation having lapsed into the comfortable silence of strangers who have exhausted immediate topics of mutual interest. The merchant's servant has taken shelter in the stable with the animals, preferring the familiar company of horses to the sometimes intimidating formality of the common room. Cedric turns from the window, his joints protesting the movement with the particular ache that winter always brings. The flagstone floor beneath his feet radiates cold despite the hearth fire's best efforts, and he makes a mental note to have more rushes strewn before evening fully arrives. Moving to the rough-hewn counter that separates the common room from the small kitchen beyond, he begins the familiar process of checking his stores. Winter has come early, and with it the necessity of careful calculation. How many weeks might pass before the roads become passable enough to bring supplies? How many mouths will need feeding during that time? What can be stretched? What must be rationed? What might be supplemented by hunting or foraging when the snow occasionally retreats? From the kitchen comes the soft humming of Edith as she works, the sound as familiar to Cedric as his own breathing. They have been married for 30 years, their lives so thoroughly intertwined that they communicate as often through gesture and glance as through words. 3 children they raised within these walls, 2 sons who now ply their trades in distant towns, and a daughter who married a merchant from York and visits when his trading routes bring them north. The inn has been their shared project, their livelihood, their legacy. Each stone in its walls, each beam in its ceiling, holds memories of triumphs and challenges weathered together. The door connecting to the kitchen swings open, and Edith emerges carrying a steaming pot of the famous stew. Her face, once considered a great beauty in the region, has softened with age, lines of laughter framing her eyes and mouth. Grey streaks the dark hair visible beneath her linen cap, but her movements remain sure and graceful, her back straight. Despite decades of bending over hearth fires and washing tubs, She meets Cedric's gaze briefly as she passes, an entire conversation compressed into that momentary connection. Concern about the weather, calculation of supplies, shared determination to meet whatever challenges lie ahead. "Your supper, good, sirs," Edith announces to the two guests as she places the pot on the iron trivet at the center of their table. She ladles generous portions into wooden bowls, the rich aroma of herbs and slowly simmered meat rising with the steam. "There is bread as well, baked fresh this morning." From her apron pocket, she produces a cloth-wrapped loaf, darkly crusted, and still carrying a hint of warmth from the oven. The monk murmurs a blessing before accepting his portion, while the merchant simply nods his thanks, his attention already fixed on the meal before him. Cedric watches the small scene unfold with the subtle pride of a craftsman whose work is being properly appreciated. The reputation of an inn rests on such moments. The quality of food offered, the grace of service, the comfort provided against the harsh world outside its doors. Despite the early winter and the challenges it presents, he feels the familiar satisfaction of fulfilling the innkeeper's ancient role, offering sanctuary, however temporary, to those journeying through an often indifferent world. His contemplation is interrupted by a sound barely audible beneath the storm's muffled howl, the distant ringing of a small bell. It comes from the pole erected at the crossroads, 50 yards from the inn's door, where travelers in distress can signal for assistance. The bell is rarely used in good weather, when the inn's lights can be easily seen from the road, but in conditions like today's blizzard, it becomes a lifeline for those who might otherwise pass by unknowing or be unable to locate the building amid swirling snow. Meeting Edith's concerned glance, Cedric moves to the heavy wooden door, lifting the bar that secures it against the elements. He braces himself before pulling it open, knowing from long experience what will follow. The wind rushes in like a hungry beast, bringing with it a swirl of snowflakes and biting cold that cuts through his woolen tunic as if it were gossamer. Raising a hand to shield his eyes, he peers into the whiteness, at first seeing nothing but the hypnotic dance of snow. Then, gradually, shapes emerge from the storm, the dark forms of horses, the outline of what might be a small cart or wagon, the hunched figures of people struggling through drifts that reach past their knees. Without hesitation, Cedric steps out into the storm, the cold striking his face like a physical blow. Snow immediately begins to accumulate on his shoulders and head as he makes his way toward the approaching travelers, his feet finding the path through years of muscle memory despite the transformed landscape. As he draws closer, details become clearer. 3 adults and what appears to be a child, 2 horses pulling a cart laden with household goods covered by a snow-dusted canvas. A family moving north, perhaps, caught unprepared by the early storm. "Here!" he calls against the wind, his voice seeming small in the vast whiteness. "This way!" He waves his arm, though the gesture feels futile against the overwhelming presence of the storm. The lead figure raises a hand in acknowledgement, altering their course slightly towards Cedric's voice. Minutes later, through combined effort and shouted guidance, the small party reaches the relative shelter of the inn's exterior wall, where the wind's force is somewhat broken by the sturdy stonework. "The Wayfarer's Rest welcomes you," Cedric says formally, though his words are nearly torn away by a fresh gust. He gestures toward the door, where golden light spills onto the snow, creating a beacon of warmth and safety. "Let us get your horses settled first, then yourselves." The tallest of the travelers nods gratefully, pulling down the scarf that has protected his lower face from the cold. "Thomas Fletcher," he introduces himself, voice raspy from the cold air. "My wife Agnes, our daughter Emma, and my brother John." We're bound for Newcastle, where I'm to take up a new position with the Weavers' Guild. He breaks off, coughing as the cold air catches in his lungs. We never expected such weather so early in the season. Cedric nods understanding. Few had anticipated this winter's early arrival, and many would be caught unprepared as this family had been. The stable lies just beyond, he explains, pointing toward a low stone building extending from the inn's northern wall. I'll help you settle your animals, then we'll see to your comfort inside. Together, the men lead the horses and cart around to the stable entrance, while Agnes guides her daughter toward the inn's main door, where Edith now stands waiting to receive them. The cooperation requires few words, the shared purpose of finding shelter, creating immediate understanding between strangers. Inside the stable, which stands marginally warmer than the external air due to the body heat of the animals already housed there, Cedric works efficiently alongside Thomas and John to unhitch the horses, rub them down with handfuls of straw, and provide them with water and feed. The merchant's servant stirs from his nest in the hay to assist, recognizing fellow travelers in need without requiring instruction. We have little space, Cedric explains, as they secure the cart's canvas covering more tightly over the family's possessions. But what we have is yours to share. The common room has floor space near the fire where pallets can be laid, or there is one small chamber if you prefer privacy for your daughter. Thomas straightens from his work, wincing as the movement pulls at cold, stiffened muscles. The common room will serve us well enough, he decides after a moment's consideration. Better to be near the fire on such a night, and Emma has slept in far less comfortable circumstances during our journey. With the horses settled and the most valuable of the family's possessions brought inside for safekeeping, they make their way back to the inn's main building, leaning into the wind that seems determined to prevent their progress. Cedric leads the way, creating something of a windbreak for the others with his broad-shouldered frame. The short journey feels much longer, each step a negotiation with the snow that sometimes gives way unexpectedly, causing them to stumble. By the time they reach the door, all three men are breathing heavily, their exposed skin reddened by cold, beards and eyebrows crusted with ice crystals that begin to melt immediately upon entering the blessed warmth of the inn. Inside, Edith has already established the newcomers near the hearth. Agnes sits on a bench drawn close to the fire, her outer garments removed and hanging on pegs to dry, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Beside her, the girl Emma clutches a wooden cup of something steaming, cider or perhaps broth, her small face still bearing the pinched look of one who has been too cold for too long. The monk has moved to make space for them, his natural compassion overcoming any potential reluctance to share the prime position before the flames. Your wife has already ordered food for you, Edith informs the newly arrived men, her practical tone masking the genuine concern that Cedric knows she feels for any traveller caught in such conditions. Remove those wet outer clothes and come warm yourselves. There is stew enough for all. Cedric watches as the small rituals of hospitality unfold, the provision of dry blankets, the serving of hot food, the arrangement of seating to allow newcomers access to the fire's warmth. These actions, repeated countless times throughout the years of keeping the inn, carry meaning beyond their practical function. They represent the ancient covenant between host and guest, the offering of sanctuary and sustenance that forms the heart of the innkeeper's calling. In weather such as this, that calling transcends mere commerce to become something closer to sacred duty. As his guests settle into the warmth and begin to recover from their ordeal, Cedric turns his attention back to the practical concerns that never cease, regardless of weather or circumstance. He moves to the small side room that serves as both storage area and private dining space for wealthier guests, mentally cataloguing supplies against this unexpected increase in mouths to feed. Sacks of flour and dried beans stand against one wall, their contents measured and rationed since the last delivery from the nearest town. Smoked meats hang from hooks in the ceiling, hams and sides of bacon that were intended to last well into the winter months. Barrels contain ale and cider, the latter pressed from apples grown in the small orchard behind the inn. Root vegetables, onions, turnips, carrots, rest in straw-filled boxes to protect against frost. The early winter presents a particular challenge. Normally, autumn would bring one final surge of travellers before the worst weather set in, their custom providing coin to purchase additional stores for the quieter winter months. This year, the sudden snow has likely prevented many from making their planned journeys, reducing that crucial income while simultaneously increasing the necessity for careful management of existing supplies. Cedric runs a calloused hand through his greying beard, making calculations based on decades of experience. If the weather clears within a week, they should manage comfortably. If the snow continues and the roads remain impassable for longer, well, adjustments will have to be made. Returning to the common room, he finds the atmosphere transformed from the earlier quiet. The Fletcher family, recovering from their ordeal in the storm, have brought new energy to the space. The girl, Emma, her colour improved by warmth and food, now engages the monk in animated conversation about the illuminated prayer book he carries. Her natural childish curiosity temporarily overcoming the shyness appropriate to her station. Her mother, Agnes, discusses weaving techniques with the merchant, who apparently trades in textiles among other goods. Thomas and his brother John share a bench, speaking in the low tones of men discussing serious matters, likely the prospects for continuing their journey when weather permits. Edith catches Cedric's eye as he returns, the slight raising of her eyebrow a question about their supply situation that requires no words. He responds with an almost imperceptible nod and small gesture. They will manage. No need for immediate concern. Their silent communication, honed through decades of partnership, allows them to share information without alarming their guests or drawing attention to potential difficulties. The innkeeper's art includes maintaining an atmosphere of reassurance and normalcy, regardless of what concerns might occupy the host's private thoughts. The evening progresses with the particular intimacy that sometimes develops among strangers, thrown together by circumstance. The common room, warm with firelight and human presence, becomes a temporary community united by the contrast between the comfort within and the howling storm without. Conversations begin to cross previous boundaries, the monk sharing stories of his travels through France before taking his orders, the merchant describing the markets of London where goods from as far as Constantinople might be found, Thomas Fletcher explaining the particular techniques of the northern weavers he hopes to join. Cedric contributes occasionally to these exchanges, but primarily observes, taking quiet satisfaction in the atmosphere his inn has fostered. This, beyond providing the basic necessities of shelter and sustenance, is the deeper purpose of such establishments, creating spaces where connections might form, where information can be exchanged, where the isolated experience of individual lives briefly overlaps to create something richer than solitary existence allows. Even in the face of winter's harsh arrival, there is warmth to be found in this temporary communion of disparate souls. As the evening deepens, Cedric makes preparations for the night. Additional pallets are brought from storage and arranged on the floor near the hearth, bedding distributed according to need and status. The merchant has paid for the inn's single private chamber upstairs, a small room with a proper bed and the luxury of a brazier to provide extra warmth through the night. The monk will sleep on a pallet in the small side room, separated from the common area by a curtain that offers modest privacy. The Fletcher family will occupy the space nearest the hearth, the most desirable position on such a night, with Emma placed between her parents for additional warmth and protection. Before retiring for the night, Cedric performs his customary circuit of the inn, checking that shutters are securely fastened against the wind, that the fire is banked properly to maintain heat through the night without risk of sparks, that the door is barred against both elements and any potential intruders. Though the latter are rare in this isolated location, particularly in such weather, the habit of security has been ingrained through years of responsibility for those who sleep under his roof. The storm continues unabated outside, snow accumulating against the walls, transforming familiar contours into strange new shapes, visible in the faint light that escapes around shutters and under doors. In the small chamber behind the kitchen that he shares with Edith, Cedric finally allows himself to acknowledge the weariness that has built throughout the day. His body, never fully free from the pains acquired through decades of physical labor, protests more loudly in cold weather, each movement accompanied by the particular creaking of joints that have seen too many winters. Edith, already in bed beneath layers of woolen blankets, watches as he performs his nightly rituals, removing outer garments, washing face and hands in water that has gone cold since being brought in, offering a simple prayer before extinguishing the candle. "The girl reminds me of Matilda at that age," Edith says softly, as Cedric slides beneath the covers beside her, bringing a momentary chill to their shared space until his body begins to warm the bedding. She refers to their daughter, now grown and living her own life far from the inn where she was raised. The same curiosity, the same way of looking at everything as if it might contain some marvelous secret. Cedric makes a sound of agreement, his eyes already growing heavy with the need for sleep. The comparison had occurred to him as well, watching Emma examine the monk's prayer book with such intense fascination. She'll have stories to tell when they finally reach Newcastle, he murmurs. Not many children her age have weathered such a storm. They lie together in comfortable silence for a time, listening to the wind's voice as it prowls around the corners of the building, testing windows and door for weakness, finding none. The sturdy construction that has sheltered them for 3 decades stands firm against winter's assault, as it has through countless storms before. There is security in this knowledge, a quiet pride in maintaining a stronghold against the elements, a place where travelers can find respite from nature's more violent moods. Before sleep claims him entirely, Cedric's thoughts turn once more to practical matters. The need to assess snow accumulation in the morning, the possibility of clearing at least a path to the stable, the calculations of supplies that must be continuously adjusted as weather conditions change. The innkeeper's mind never fully rests from such considerations, the responsibility for others' welfare creating a constant background hum of planning and assessment. Yet beneath these practical concerns lies the deeper satisfaction of fulfilling a necessary role, of standing as a point of light and warmth in a landscape transformed by winter's cold hand. Morning arrives with deceptive gentleness, the storm having spent its initial fury during the night. Cedric wakes to a quality of light different from normal daybreak, the particular blue-white luminescence that snow creates when it covers the world. For a moment he lies still, orienting himself to the day ahead, listening to Edith's steady breathing beside him and the muffled sounds of the inn beginning to stir around them. Then, with the decision that has begun each day of his adult life, he pushes aside the blankets and rises to meet whatever challenges await. The cold air strikes his exposed skin immediately, raising goosebumps along his arms as he quickly pulls. on layers of clothing, woolen stockings, leather shoes lined with rabbit fur for winter wear, linen undertunic followed by a heavier woolen overtunic, a leather jerkin that has molded itself to his form through years of use. Each item is donned with the efficiency of long practice, a daily armor against cold and the physical demands of his profession. Edith stirs as he dresses, but does not yet rise. Their long-established routine allows her another brief interval of rest before kitchen duties demand her attention. The common room remains quiet as Cedric enters, his footsteps deliberately softened to avoid disturbing the sleepers still huddled on pallets near the hearth. The fire has burned low during the night, reduced to a bed of glowing embers that provide minimal heat. His first task, as it has been every morning for decades, is to coax these embers back to active flame, adding kindling gradually until the fire remembers its purpose. As warmth begins to return to the space, he moves to the door, curious to assess the storm's legacy in full daylight. Unbarring the heavy wooden door requires more effort than usual. Snow has drifted against it during the night, creating resistance. That must be overcome with a firm push. When the door finally swings open, Cedric finds himself facing a wall of white reaching nearly to his waist. Beyond this immediate barrier, the world has been transformed into an unrecognizable landscape of smooth curves and buried landmarks. The crossroads that gives the inn its strategic location has vanished entirely, the roads now indistinguishable from the surrounding fields. Only the bell pole rises above the drifts, its iron bell rimed with frost that glitters in the early light. Cedric takes a moment to simply observe the altered world, understanding immediately the implications for his guests and his establishment. No one will be continuing their journey today, nor likely tomorrow. The roads, difficult to navigate even in good conditions at this time of year, have effectively ceased to exist until sufficient thaw occurs or enough travelers pass to pack the snow into navigable paths. The Wayfarer's Rest will need to live up to the second part of its name for some days to come. His practical assessment complete, Cedric allows himself a brief moment to appreciate the stark beauty before him. The rising sun catches on every crystalline surface, transforming ordinary objects into items of wonder. A simple wooden water barrel at the corner of the building now wears a crown of ice that reflects the light in fractured rainbows. The bare branches of apple trees in the small orchard behind the inn have become delicate sculptures outlined in white. Even the rough wooden fence marking the property boundary has been softened, its utilitarian posts now wearing smooth caps of snow like the ceremonial hats of court officials. The moment of aesthetic appreciation passes quickly, replaced by the immediate practical need to create paths through the snow. The stable must be accessible for tending to the animals. Wood must be brought in from the pile at the building's side. Water must be fetched from the well. These basic necessities will require significant effort under current conditions. Cedric closes the door against the cold and turns back to the common room, mentally calculating how many able bodies might assist with these tasks once breakfast has provided necessary strength. The Fletcher brothers are already stirring, Thomas sitting up on his pallet and rubbing his eyes while John pulls. On Boots beside him, the girl Emma remains curled beneath blankets, only a tangle of dark hair visible at the edge of her covering. Her mother Agnes has already risen and moved to help Edith, the two women establishing an immediate practical alliance, as is common among those accustomed to household management. The monk kneels in morning prayer near the window, his lips moving silently over familiar words, while his fingers trace the path of well-worn prayer beads. Only the merchant remains unseen, presumably still enjoying the relative luxury of the private chamber upstairs. The storm has passed, Cedric informs the waking guests, his tone matter-of-fact rather than either optimistic or discouraging. But it has left nearly 3 feet of snow in its wake. The roads are impassable for now. He allows this information to settle before continuing. You are welcome to remain until conditions improve. We have food enough for all, though we may need to be somewhat careful with portions if the snow lingers too many days. Thomas nods his understanding, his expression suggesting he had anticipated this situation. We're grateful for your hospitality, he responds, speaking for his family, and will contribute our labor while we're here. I'm handy with repairs, and John can split wood as well as any man. We won't be idle guests. This offer brings a genuine smile to Cedric's weathered face. In his experience, travelers fall into 2 broad categories. Those who understand that adverse circumstances create a community of mutual aid, and those who believe that payment for lodging absolves them of any responsibility toward the common good. The Fletcher family clearly belongs to the former group, and their willingness to contribute will make the forced cohabitation more manageable for all concerned. The first task must be clearing paths to essential areas, Cedric explains, accepting the offered help without unnecessary expressions of gratitude that might diminish the dignity of the arrangement. The stable, the woodpile, the well. Once those are established, we can assess what other work might be needed. From the kitchen doorway comes the welcome aroma of porridge cooking. Simple food, but filling and warm, ideal for a winter morning. Edith appears moments later, carrying a steaming pot to the central table, while Agnes follows with a tray of wooden bowls and spoons. Breakfast is ready for those who are, Edith announces in her practical way. Best to eat before tackling the snow. The small community gathers around the table. The monk having completed his devotions, the merchant finally emerged from his private chamber, looking somewhat disgruntled at the news of their enforced extended stay. Emma, fully awake now, helps, distributes spoons with the serious concentration of a child entrusted with an adult task. Cedric observes the gathering with the experienced eye of one who has hosted countless such impromptu groupings over the years. Despite their different backgrounds and destinations, these people will share this space and their lives for at least several days to come. The dynamics established now will determine whether that shared time passes in harmony or discord. After breakfast, the men prepare to confront the snow. Layers of clothing are donned, any available gloves or mittens distributed. Plans made for the most efficient approach to clearing necessary paths. The merchant, after some initial reluctance, agrees to participate, perhaps recognizing that maintaining goodwill in such close quarters serves his own interests, or perhaps simply unwilling to be seen as less willing than the others to contribute to the common good. Cedric provides the few snow-clearing implements the inn possesses: a broad wooden shovel used primarily for moving grain, a slightly rusted iron spade, a wooden board that can be used to push snow aside. The work proves as difficult as anticipated. The snow, having fallen over many hours, has settled into layers of varying density, the bottom compressed by the weight above into a substance that resists easy removal. The men establish a rotation, taking turns with the more effective tools, while others use boards, or even their booted feet to pack down a rough path. Their breath forms clouds in the cold air, conversation limited to essential communication as they conserve energy for the physical effort required. Despite the difficulty, there is a certain satisfaction in the visible progress. The gradually emerging path from door to stable, the cleared space around the well, the access to the woodpile, being steadily restored through collective effort. Inside the inn, the women establish their own division of labor. Edith maintains her domain in the kitchen, preparing food, and managing supplies with the careful attention of one who understands that abundance cannot be taken for granted. Agnes assists with cooking and cleaning, her weaver's hands proving equally deft at kneading dough or mending a torn tablecloth discovered during morning chores. Emma is assigned simpler tasks, carrying stacked bowls from one location to another, sorting through a basket of dried herbs to separate those needed for the day's cooking, sweeping the already clean corners of the common room with a broom nearly as tall as herself. By midday, when the workers come in stamping snow from their boots and rubbing cold reddened hands, essential paths have been established around the inn. The men's exertion has left them hungry and fatigued, but also carrying the particular satisfaction that comes from necessary labor successfully completed. Bowls of hot soup, yesterday's stew thinned somewhat with additional water and winter, vegetables, restore their energy, while conversation turns to assessment of conditions and speculation about how long the roads might remain impassable. I've seen similar snowfalls 4 or 5 times in my years here, Cedric tells them, breaking bread into his soup as he speaks. If the weather stays cold, as it likely will, the snow won't melt quickly. But if another traveller comes through, with a wagon or several on horseback, their passing will begin to establish a path that makes movement easier for those who follow. And if no one comes? The merchant asks, his tone suggesting he has already calculated the cost of each day's delay to his business interests. Then we wait, Cedric answers simply. The winter has come early, but it follows the same patterns as always. The road will emerge again in its time. This philosophy, neither optimistic nor fatalistic, but accepting of natural rhythms and limitations, has served him well through decades of innkeeping in a region where weather often dictates the terms of human activity. The conversation shifts to other topics as the meal continues. The monk describes the monastery he is journeying toward. Thomas Fletcher explains the opportunity that awaits him in Newcastle. The merchant reluctantly shares information about markets and prices that might benefit the others in their future transactions. Emma listens wide-eyed to these discussions of the wider world, occasionally asking questions that reveal both childish naivety and surprising perception. The temporary community begins to coalesce, personalities and relationships establishing their patterns as naturally as the snow outside has shaped itself to the contours of the landscape. After the midday meal, attention turns to other necessary tasks that can be accomplished despite the weather. John Fletcher examines the inn's wooden shutters, making small repairs to hinges and latches that have worked loose over time. Thomas discovers a persistent leak in the stable roof and sets about fixing it with materials at hand. The merchant's servant, skilled with animals, takes over care of the horses to allow Cedric to focus on other concerns. Inside, Agnes reveals her knowledge of medicinal herbs by preparing a salve for the chilblains that Emma has developed from exposure to the cold. Throughout the afternoon, Cedric divides his attention between numerous small tasks and the larger, ongoing assessment of their situation. He checks supplies again, makes more precise calculations now that he knows exactly how many people require sustenance, considers alternatives should the snow last longer than the current stores will comfortably accommodate. The early winter has created a precarious balance between resources and needs. Not an immediate crisis, but a situation requiring careful management and possibly difficult decisions in the days ahead. As daylight begins to fade, bringing the particular early darkness of winter afternoons, the physical work transitions to more social forms of occupation. The monk offers to read aloud from his prayer book, the Latin words unfamiliar to most listeners, but the rhythm of the language creating a soothing backdrop to other quiet activities. Thomas produces a small knife and piece of wood, beginning to carve what might become a toy for Emma, or perhaps a useful implement for the inn. Agnes takes up mending work on a torn garment, her fingers moving with the practiced precision of one who has sewn countless stitches over a lifetime. The merchant reviews entries in a small ledger book, lips moving silently as he calculates profits and losses. Cedric watches these activities from his position near the hearth, where he is engaged in the necessary but undemanding task of repairing a frayed rope. Such quiet domestic scenes are common during winter at the inn, when darkness comes early and outdoor activities become limited by weather. Usually, however, such evenings involve only himself and Edith, perhaps with a single traveller or two sharing the space. The current gathering, forced together by circumstance rather than choice, creates a different dynamic, one requiring more conscious attention to maintaining harmony and addressing needs before they become sources of conflict. Edith emerges from the kitchen carrying a small wooden box that Cedric recognizes immediately. It contains a set of carved bone dice and counters used for a simple game that has entertained guests on long winter evenings for as long as the inn has stood. "Perhaps we might have some gentle amusement before supper," she suggests, her practical nature recognizing the value of structured entertainment in preventing the restlessness that can develop during enforced confinement. Emma's face lights with interest, and even the merchant looks up from his accounts with mild curiosity. The game requires no particular skill beyond basic counting, making it accessible to all regardless of education or background. Soon the central table becomes the focus of attention as the first round begins, rules explained to those unfamiliar with this particular variation. Cedric observes rather than participates, taking quiet satisfaction in the moment of communal enjoyment his establishment has facilitated. The flickering light from hearth and candles catches on their faces. Concentration, occasional delight at a fortunate throw, good-natured dismay at losses. For this brief interval, the harsh realities of winter and their individual concerns recede, replaced by the simple pleasure of shared activity. As darkness settles completely outside, transforming windows into black mirrors that reflect the room's interior rather than showing the world beyond, Cedric rises to make his evening inspection before supper. The routine never varies regardless of season or circumstance. A careful check of the fire's safety, an assessment of fuel supplies for the night, a brief venture outside to ensure all is secure around the inn's perimeter. This last task proves more challenging than usual, requiring him to follow the paths carved through snow that reaches above his knees in places. The cold strikes immediately as he steps outside, the temperature having dropped significantly with the sun's disappearance. The night sky above presents a spectacle of extraordinary clarity. The snow-reflected light of stars and a waning moon creating a landscape nearly as visible as during daylight, though rendered in shades of blue and silver, rather than normal colors. Cedric pauses in his circuit around the building, allowing himself a moment to absorb the austere beauty of the transformed world. In the distance, a wolf howls, not close enough to present immediate concern, but a reminder that winter brings its own set of dangers beyond cold and scarcity. The sound echoes briefly across the snow-muffled landscape before silence returns, deep and complete in a way rarely experienced except in the heart of winter. Returning inside, Cedric finds supper. Preparations well advanced. The table has been cleared of game pieces and now holds wooden trenchers and cups in anticipation of the evening meal. Edith and Agnes work together with the synchronized movements of women who understand kitchen tasks intimately. Their earlier division between host and guest having evolved into a more collaborative relationship. The aroma of baking bread fills the common room, a scent that invariably creates an atmosphere of comfort and anticipation regardless of how simple the accompanying food might be. The evening meal consists of bread fresh from the oven, served with a pottage of dried beans and preserved vegetables, flavored with herbs, and a small amount of precious salt. No meat accompanies this simple fare, a deliberate choice by Cedric and Edith to conserve their stores of smoked and salted protein for the days ahead. If anyone notices this economizing measure, they make no comment. The food, though basic, satisfies the heightened appetite that cold weather and physical labor have generated, and the fresh bread provides both sustenance and the particular comfort that only newly baked loaves can offer. Conversation during the meal flows easily, the shared experiences of the day providing common ground that bridges differences in background and station. The monk describes snowfalls in his native Normandy, where winters bring different challenges than those of northern England. Thomas Fletcher speaks of his hopes for their new life in Newcastle, painting a picture of future security that clearly aims to reassure his wife and daughter as much as inform his listeners. The merchant, somewhat mellowed by food and the general goodwill around the table, shares a humorous tale of being caught in a similarly unseasonable storm years earlier, which ended with him seeking shelter in a shepherd's hut alongside 6 lambs and a particularly ill-tempered ram. After the meal, as darkness settles fully outside and the inn's interior becomes a self-contained world of firelight and human connection, another kind of sharing begins. The monk produces a small wooden flute from his modest possessions, explaining that music has remained his one worldly pleasure since taking his vows. The simple melodies he plays transform the atmosphere, adding a dimension of beauty to the utilitarian surroundings. Emma watches in fascination as his fingers move over the instrument's holes, creating changes in pitch that seem magical to her young understanding. Thomas Fletcher reveals a pleasant baritone voice, offering a ballad that speaks of love lost and found again, a common enough theme but rendered poignant by the setting and circumstances. Even the merchant contributes, demonstrating a card trick learned from a traveller from distant Spain, his usually stern countenance softened by the simple pleasure of surprising his audience. These small shares of personal gifts and knowledge represent a particular kind of wealth that transcends material concerns, creating bonds that make their enforced proximity easier to bear. As the evening progresses, Cedric finds himself reflecting on the nature of his profession and establishment. The Wayfarer's Rest exists primarily to provide the basics of human need: food, shelter, warmth against the elements. Yet in moments like this, it becomes something more profound. A temporary community where strangers find common humanity, where the artificial divisions of status and background briefly dissolve in the face of shared experience. There is satisfaction in this knowledge, a sense that his life's work serves purposes beyond mere sustenance and profit. The thought of profit, however, brings his mind back to practical considerations. Each day these guests remain adds to their accounts: lodging, food, ale, firewood consumed. Under normal circumstances, such extended stays would benefit the inn's finances significantly, but these are not wealthy travelers indulging in excessive consumption. They are people caught by circumstances beyond their control, their resources likely limited and carefully calculated for their intended journeys. What is the right balance between business necessity and human compassion? This question has presented itself to Cedric many times over the years, and his answers have varied according to specific situations and his own capacity to absorb potential losses. Such reflections are interrupted when Edith touches his arm lightly, a private signal developed through years of partnership. Her eyes direct his attention to the merchant, who has risen from his place by the fire and now approaches with the deliberate manner of one who has reached a decision after considerable thought. Cedric rises to meet him, sensing that whatever conversation is coming is intended to be somewhat private, despite the limited space available for true confidentiality. "Master Innkeeper," the merchant begins, his voice pitched low to avoid carrying. "To the others, I find myself in something of a difficulty. My journey's delay costs me more than just time. There are arrangements waiting at my destination, goods that may be redirected to other buyers if I do not arrive when expected." He pauses, seemingly struggling between pride and necessity. "My purse contains sufficient coin for normal travel expenses, but not for an extended stay such as this weather forces upon us. I would propose an arrangement that might benefit us both." Cedric listens patiently, having heard variations of this predicament many times before. Weather and commerce have always maintained an uneasy relationship, with innkeepers often serving as unofficial bankers, negotiators, or simply absorbers of losses when these forces collide. "What arrangement did you have in mind?" he asks, his tone neither encouraging nor dismissive. From within his tunic, the merchant produces a small leather pouch, which he partially opens to reveal its contents. Several small items of silver jewelry, not extravagant, but finely crafted and clearly valuable. "These were intended as gifts for my sister's household, where I expected to lodge in the next town. I would offer one as payment for our continued accommodation until the roads clear." His expression suggests this offer costs him some measure of either financial or sentimental value, perhaps both. Cedric considers the proposal, aware that Edith is discreetly watching this exchange while maintaining her conversation with Agnes across the room. The silver would indeed exceed the value of the lodging and food the merchant and his servant might consume, even if their stay extended to a week or more. Yet accepting such payment introduces complications, the need to eventually convert the item to more practical currency, the possible perception by other guests that different standards apply to different travelers, the implied formalization of what has thus far been a community response to shared misfortune. "Keep your silver for now," Cedric decides after brief consideration. "We will speak of payment when the time comes for you to continue your journey. Perhaps the roads will clear sooner than we expect." This response is deliberately ambiguous, neither refusing the potential payment nor creating an expectation that normal charges will be waived. It preserves both the merchant's dignity and Cedric's flexibility to assess the situation as it develops. Relief crosses the merchant's features briefly before his customary reserve returns. With a nod of acknowledgement, he returns to his place near the fire, the small pouch disappearing back into the folds of his clothing. Cedric catches Edith's eye across the room, the slight upward curve of her mouth indicating approval of his handling of the matter. After 3 decades of partnership, they rarely need to discuss such decisions, each understanding the principles that guide their management of the inn and its human complexities. As the evening deepens toward night, preparations begin for sleep. The same arrangements as the previous night are confirmed, with pallets laid out near the hearth for the Fletcher family, the monk retiring to his curtained alcove, the merchant climbing the narrow stairs to the private chamber. Cedric performs his nightly ritual of securing the building, checking the bar across the main door, ensuring shutters are fastened against potential overnight winds, banking the fire carefully for maximum safety and sustained heat. These actions, performed countless times over decades, carry the weight of responsibility for all who sleep under his roof. In their private chamber, Cedric and Edith speak quietly of the day's events and their assessment of their guests. Such conversations are a long-established part of their routine, an opportunity to share observations and concerns away from those being discussed. The Fletcher girl has developed a cough, Edith notes, her practical nature immediately identifying potential problems that might require attention. Nothing severe yet, but worth watching. The cold journey, followed by the warmth of the inn, can sometimes settle in the lungs. Cedric nods, adding this information to his mental catalogue of matters requiring monitoring. Thomas mentioned they have relatives in Newcastle who expect them before the new moon. If the snow lingers beyond a week, he may grow desperate to continue regardless of conditions. This represents another common situation the innkeeper has witnessed, the conflict between safety and pressing obligations that can lead travellers to make dangerous decisions. "And our supplies?" Edith asks, though she knows the answer as well, as he does, having managed the inn's kitchen for 30 years. "Sufficient for now," Cedric confirms. "If all remains as it is, we have perhaps 10 days before true hardship begins. By then, surely some thaw or passing travellers will have made the roads somewhat passable." This assessment is neither optimistic nor pessimistic, but simply practical. The balance of probability based on long experience with the region's weather, patterns, and the necessities of commerce that eventually force movement regardless of conditions. Their conversation drifts to smaller matters, repairs needed to a leaking bucket, the quality of the latest batch of ale, whether the merchant's offer of silver should be reconsidered if circumstances change. The familiar intimacy of these discussions, focused on shared responsibilities and mutual concerns rather than personal matters, forms the foundation of their marriage and partnership. Like many couples of their station and generation, their relationship has been defined primarily by common purpose and complementary skills, rather than romantic notions. Though genuine affection and respect have grown through years of shared challenges and achievements, sleep comes more easily than the previous night, their bodies accustomed now to the increased physical demands created by the snow. Cedric's last thoughts before consciousness fades concern the weather. Whether the clear sky he observed earlier might indicate a further drop in temperature overnight, how that might affect conditions for humans and animals alike, what adjustments might be necessary in the morning. The innkeeper's mind never fully releases its grip on practical concerns, even in the approach to dreams. Dawn arrives with a quality of light that immediately tells Cedric the weather has changed again. Even before opening his eyes fully, he senses a difference in how illumination fills the small window of their chamber. No longer the intense reflection of sunlight on snow, but something more diffuse, indicating cloud cover has returned. Rising and approaching the window, his suspicions are confirmed. The pristine white landscape of yesterday has been overtaken by a heavy grey sky, and fresh snowflakes have begun to fall, small and dry in the intense cold, accumulating almost imperceptibly upon the already substantial drifts. This development will not be welcome news to his guests, particularly the merchant and the Fletcher family, whose journeys already face significant delay. Cedric dresses quickly, preparing himself mentally for the mixture of resignation, frustration, and concern that will greet this latest turn of weather. The innkeeper's role in such circumstances extends beyond physical provision to a form of emotional stewardship, maintaining calm, offering realistic assessment without unnecessary pessimism, reminding those temporarily stranded that patience often proves the wisest course when confronting winter's whims. The common room is still quiet as he enters. Only the monk already awake and engaged in morning prayers near the window, his silhouette outlined against the grey light filtering through the rippled glass. Cedric moves to the hearth, where last night's carefully banked fire has maintained a core of heat that needs only attention and fresh fuel to return to active flame. As warmth begins to spread through the room, Emma coughs in her sleep, a small, sound but concerning in its depth, the potential beginning of the chest ailment Edith had anticipated. The day unfolds with the particular slowness of winter confinement. The renewed snowfall eliminates the possibility of further clearing work outside, limiting physical activity to necessary tasks like tending animals and bringing in firewood. Inside, the inhabitants of the inn find various ways to occupy themselves. Thomas Fletcher assists Cedric in repairing a wobbly bench that has long needed attention. The merchant engages the monk in a game of chess using a small travelling set produced from his belongings. Agnes teaches Emma to form simple stitches on a scrap of linen provided by Edith. By midday, Emma's cough has worsened, developing the rasping quality that signals infection rather than simple throat irritation. Agnes looks increasingly concerned, holding her hand to her daughter's forehead to check for fever. Edith, observing this, disappears briefly into the storage area, returning with a small clay pot containing a pungent salve made from goose fat, infused with herbs. "Rub this on her chest," she instructs Agnes quietly, "and have her breathe the steam from this tisane." She offers a cup containing hot water steeped with dried thyme and mint. Simple remedies, but often effective against winter ailments if applied early enough. As the day progresses, conversation repeatedly returns to assessments of weather and speculation about road conditions. The merchant grows visibly restless, pacing between window and fire, calculating losses with each passing hour. Thomas Fletcher maintains a calmer demeanor, but watches his daughter with increasing concern, the combination of travel delay and developing illness clearly weighing on his mind. The monk alone seems entirely at peace with their situation, his acceptance perhaps stemming from religious training or simply a personality naturally inclined toward patience. Cedric observes these varying responses with the experienced eye of one who has hosted countless weather-bound travelers. He has seen how enforced proximity can bring out both the best and worst in people, some finding reserves of adaptation and good humor, others descending into irritability or even hostility as confinement extends. His role involves subtle interventions when necessary, suggesting activities to distract the restless, creating small tasks that provide a sense of purpose, occasionally mediating when tensions rise too high. In this particular group, he notes with approval, natural cooperation has thus far prevailed over friction, despite their diverse backgrounds and differing stakes in the delay. By evening, the snow continues to fall, though its intensity has lessened somewhat. Emma's condition has neither improved nor significantly worsened. Her cough remains troublesome, but her spirits seem good, particularly when the monk produces small figures carved from candle wax and creates a simple story to entertain her. The evening meal is notably simpler than previous days, a clear sign of Edith's careful rationing as their stay extends with no clear end in sight. Bread remains plentiful, but the pottage contains fewer vegetables and no traces of meat, relying on herbs for flavor rather than more precious ingredients. After the meal, as darkness settles fully outside and the common room becomes a closed world of firelight and human presence, Thomas Fletcher approaches Cedric privately. His expression carries the particular gravity of a father concerned for his child's welfare. "If Emma's cough worsens," he says quietly, "we cannot remain here indefinitely, regardless of the snow. She needs proper care. Perhaps medicines your inn naturally wouldn't stock." The unspoken question hangs between them. What options exist if a true emergency develops in this isolated location? Cedric considers his response carefully, balancing honesty with reassurance. "There is a village 3 miles east," he explains. Small, but with a wise woman known for her skill with chest ailments. If necessary, I could make the journey there. It would be difficult in these conditions, but not impossible. He does not add that such a journey would carry its own significant risks, or that the wise woman's remedies, while often effective, offer no guarantees. Some truths serve no purpose in present circumstances. Thomas nods, visibly relieved that contingencies exist, however imperfect. Let us hope it doesn't come to that, he says, glancing toward Emma, who currently sits wrapped in blankets near the fire, listening wide-eyed as the monk demonstrates how to form shadow figures against the wall using only his hands and the firelight. The remedies your wife provided may be sufficient. As evening transitions to night, the atmosphere in the common room grows subdued. The unrelenting snow outside, visible only as occasional flakes catching the light when they pass near windows, creates a sense of siege that affects even the most stoic temperaments. Conversation turns to stories of other winters, other storms. The merchant recounting a legendary blizzard that halted all commerce in London for a fortnight. Thomas describing northern winters where entire villages were cut off for months. The monk offering tales of alpine passes, where travelers are guided by specially trained dogs during dangerous conditions. These shared narratives of survival serve a purpose beyond mere entertainment, creating a sense of perspective and resilience in the face of their own relatively modest predicament. Before sleep claims the household, Cedric makes his customary circuit of the inn, checking security and fire safety as he has done each night for decades. Outside, the world has disappeared entirely under fresh snow. Landmarks obliterated, familiar contours transformed into an alien landscape of white waves and shadowed valleys. The cold strikes his exposed skin with particular intensity, suggesting the temperature has dropped significantly with nightfall. Such conditions make travel not merely difficult, but potentially deadly. A fact he will need to emphasize if any of his guests begin to consider attempting departure before natural thaws or human intervention make the roads passable again. In bed beside Edith, listening to the profound silence that only heavy snowfall can create, Cedric reviews mental calculations of supplies and provisions. If this second storm extends as long as the first, difficult decisions may become necessary. Further reductions in portions, prioritization of available food for those most vulnerable like Emma, perhaps eventually seeking assistance from neighbors despite the challenges of movement through deep snow. The innkeeper's responsibility extends beyond mere hospitality in such circumstances, becoming a matter of genuine survival for those who have placed themselves under his roof and care. Morning brings little change in weather conditions. Snow continues to fall, though with decreased intensity, adding to accumulation that has already transformed the landscape into something barely recognizable. Cedric rises early as always, his body protesting the movement more than usual, winter's chill having settled deeply into aging joints during the night. The common room fire requires particular attention this morning, having burned lower than intended, suggesting the night's cold exceeded even his experienced estimation when banking the flames. Emma's cough greets him before he sees her, deeper now, with the worrying rattle that suggests fluid gathering in small lungs. Agnes sits beside her daughter's pallet, dark circles beneath her eyes, indicating a night spent largely sleepless, alternating between concern and attempted remedies. When she sees Cedric tending the fire, she rises and approaches, her voice kept low to avoid waking others still sleeping nearby. She burned with fever through the night, Agnes reports, the composed facade of previous days cracking slightly to reveal the depth of maternal worry beneath. It broke toward dawn, but this cough... She trails off, glancing back at her daughter, who has fallen into restless sleep again. My sister's child had similar symptoms 2 winters past. The sickness settled in her chest for weeks. Cedric nods, understanding memories surfacing of his own children's winter ailments years ago. The particular helplessness a parent feels when facing illness they cannot simply drive away through effort or sacrifice. Edith will prepare a stronger remedy. When she wakes, he assures Agnes. She keeps certain herbs for just such occasions. This is true, though he does not mention that their supply of the most effective medicinals has dwindled over the autumn, with replenishment prevented by the early winter's arrival. As others begin to stir and the day's activities gradually organize themselves around limited options, Cedric finds himself increasingly preoccupied with Emma's condition. The innkeeper's responsibility toward guests typically focuses on comfort and basic needs. A clean place to sleep, adequate food, protection from elements and potential dangers. Serious illness introduces complications beyond the normal scope of hospitality, particularly in isolated locations with limited resources. The wise woman in the nearby village would indeed have more effective remedies than Edith's kitchen pharmacy can provide. But reaching her through current conditions would be challenging at best, potentially fatal at worst. By midday, a decision becomes unavoidable. Emma's fever has returned, her breathing increasingly labored despite Edith's strongest herbal infusion administered in careful spoonfuls whenever the child can be roused enough to swallow. Thomas and Agnes confer in low voices, their expressions carrying the particular tension of parents forced to choose between difficult options, remaining where basic care and shelter are certain but specialized help unavailable, or attempting a dangerous journey toward more effective remedies with no guarantee of successful arrival. When they approach Cedric, their decision is already visible in their eyes before Thomas speaks. "We cannot wait for the weather to improve," he states simply. "Emma needs help beyond what is available here, through no fault of your generous hospitality." He straightens his shoulders slightly, a man preparing to face necessary danger. "I'll set out for the village you mentioned. If you can provide directions clear enough to follow in these conditions, I believe I can make the journey." Cedric considers this proposal with the serious attention it deserves, weighing multiple factors simultaneously. Thomas is strong and determined, but he lacks familiarity with the local landscape, even under normal conditions. Heavy snow can disorient even experienced travelers, landmarks disappearing under uniform whiteness, distances becoming impossible to judge accurately. The village lies 3 miles east, but the direct path crosses open fields where drifts may have accumulated to dangerous depths. The slightly longer route following the old Roman road would provide firmer footing, but requires recognizing subtle features now buried under snow. "Not alone," Cedric finally responds, the weight of responsibility clear in his voice. "I will guide you there." This decision seems the only moral choice available, though it means leaving Edith to manage the inn and remaining guests without his assistance, potentially for an extended period if conditions worsen while they are away. Preparations begin immediately, creating a focus of purposeful activity that temporarily distracts from the underlying anxiety. Cedric selects appropriate clothing for the journey, additional layers to protect against prolonged exposure, scarves to wrap around faces against wind and snow, sturdy walking sticks to probe depths before stepping into potentially treacherous drifts. Edith prepares a small package of bread and cheese to carry, along with a skin of watered ale that will provide both hydration and quick energy if needed. The monk contributes a small vial of blessed oil intended for his new monastery, insisting its presence might provide both practical protection against frostbite and spiritual assistance for their journey. Most valuable of all, Cedric retrieves an item rarely needed, but maintained specifically for such emergencies. A small brass compass, acquired years ago from a grateful navigator who had sheltered at the inn during another historic storm. In conditions where visibility may be reduced to arm's length and familiar landmarks have vanished beneath snow, this simple tool might mean the difference between successful arrival and dangerous disorientation. As they make final preparations, unexpected assistance arrives in the form of John Fletcher, who insists on accompanying them despite his brother's initial objections. 3 are safer than 2 in such conditions, he argues practically. If injury occurs, one can remain with the injured while the third continues for help. This logic proves irrefutable, and the departure party increases to 3, a safer number indeed for wilderness travel under challenging conditions. Before they set out, Cedric kneels briefly beside Emma's pallet. The child's face appears flushed with fever, her breathing labored, but her eyes momentarily clear as she recognizes him. "We're going to bring medicine that will make you well," he tells her simply, avoiding complex explanations or false promises. She nods slightly, too weak for further response, but visibly reassured by the calm confidence he projects despite his internal concerns about their journey. At the door, Edith helps secure Cedric's layers of clothing, her efficient movements masking the anxiety he knows she must feel. They have been separated rarely in their decades together, and never during conditions that present such obvious danger. "Follow the Roman road as far as the Lightning Oak," she reminds him, though he needs no such instruction after 30 years of travelling these paths. The drifts will be less severe where the old walls still stand. Her practical advice is also her way of expressing care, focusing on concrete details that might contribute to safe return, rather than dwelling on fears or possible negative outcomes. The 3 men step out into a world transformed by snow and silence. Though the active snowfall has diminished to occasional flakes, the accumulation from days of storms has created an almost unrecognizable landscape. Drifts rise higher than a man's head in places where wind has gathered the snow against obstacles. The paths laboriously cleared days earlier have vanished completely, requiring them to break trail anew through knee-deep powder that exhausts the legs with each step. Their breath forms clouds before their faces, immediately crystallizing on beards and eyebrows despite the scarves wrapped around their lower features. Cedric leads the way, walking stick probing before each step, eyes constantly assessing the terrain for hidden hazards or recognizable features beneath the snow's disguise. The compass confirms their general direction, but true navigation relies on his intimate knowledge of the land, the subtle rise and fall of ground, the placement of ancient boundary markers, the patterns of vegetation partially visible where wind has scoured snow away from higher points. Thomas and John follow closely, creating a small human chain through the whiteness, occasionally rotating positions so that the exhausting work of breaking trail is shared among their collective strength. Time loses meaning in such conditions. Progress measured not in standard units but in recognized landmarks successfully located and left behind. They pass the Lightning Oak, a massive dead tree struck years ago and now standing like a blackened sentinel, marking the intersection of old boundaries. Further on, they locate the remains of the Roman wall, stones still stubbornly resisting. Time's passage after a millennium, providing slightly easier passage where their solid presence has prevented snow from accumulating to full depth. Each such discovery brings momentary encouragement, confirmation that they remain on course despite the disorienting uniformity of the snow-covered landscape. The physical toll of their journey becomes increasingly apparent as they progress. Breaking trail through deep snow demands extraordinary effort from leg muscles, each step requiring the lifting of feet higher than normal walking. then pushing through resistant material before finding uncertain footing beneath. Cold air burns in lungs, working harder than usual, while extremities gradually lose sensation despite protective layers. Conversation diminishes to essential communication only. Breath too precious to waste on unnecessary words when each inhalation of frigid air carries its own discomfort. Approximately halfway to their destination, they pause briefly in the lee of a small copse of trees where wind has carved a relatively sheltered hollow. Water from the skin is passed around, each man taking careful sips to avoid the excessive thirst that cold weather paradoxically produces while actually dehydrating the body through increased respiration. Small pieces of bread and cheese are consumed, providing necessary energy for the remainder of their journey. The rest is kept deliberately brief, long enough to restore some strength, but not so extended that cooling bodies might begin to stiffen or warming muscles.